Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 19, 2021 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. First item on our agenda is roll call. Jane?
Chairman Shernick,
Here?
Commissioner Flake,
Here.
Commissioner Goldberg,
Here.
Commissioner Height,
Present.
Commissioner Honoran,
Here.
Commissioner Poland,
Here.
Commissioner Teta.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Jane. Before we get started, I want to read this. Anyone wishing to speak during public invited to be heard, which is items 4 and 7, or during any public hearing items, which are agenda items 6A and 6B, will need to watch the live stream of the meeting for instructions about how to call in to provide public comment at the appropriate times. Instructions will be given during the meeting and displayed on the screen, such as we're doing now, when it is time to call in and provide comments. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person, and each speaker will be asked to state their name and address for the record prior to proceeding with their comments. Please remember to mute the live stream when you are called upon to speak. Next on our agenda is communications from our planning director, Glenn Van Nimwergen.
Hi, Commissioners and Chairman Shernick. I don't have anything at this time.
Okay, very good. We'll move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is our first public invited to be heard. So Susan, if we can put that picture back up on the screen. The information is being displayed on the screen for those viewing from home. So if you want to call in and speak about something that is not on tonight's agenda, not one of the agenda items, but anything else, we'd love to hear from you. If so, dial 1-888-788-0099. When prompted, enter the meeting ID 837-866-6906. When we're ready to hear public comment, we will call on you to speak based on the last 3 digits of your phone number. Each speaker must state their name and address for the record and will be allowed 5 minutes to speak. Please remember to mute the live stream when you are called upon to speak. To do this, we need 5 minutes of time to do all the behind the scenes work. So we will now take a 5-minute break. We'll be back at 7:10.
Chair, give me just a minute. We'll drop the screen here. We will wait for our live stream to get caught up. And just want to let you know that our council representative, Aaron Rodriguez, has joined the meeting. Chair, give me just a minute. We'll drop the screen here. Looks like our live stream is now caught up. And
Okay.
we do not have any callers during this first public invited to be heard.
All right, thank you, Susan. So we will close the public invited to be heard. Next on our agenda is approval of our minutes from the April 21, 2021 meeting. Commissioner Height.
I would move to approve with one addition, page 5, line 35. There's a typo describing the title for Deputy City Attorney Tate. There's a stutter.
So I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch what the typo was.
So there's a typo that needs to be corrected, which would be so I'd move to approve with the correction of that typographic error.
Okay. So any discussion, Commissioner Goldberg?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the minutes and we have a second to approve the minutes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's do a vote. Yay or nay, Commissioner Teta,
Yeah,
Commissioner Onaran?
I wasn't there, so I abstained.
Okay. Commissioner Goldberg,
Yay.
Commissioner Height,
Yay.
Commissioner Poland,
Yay.
Commissioner Flagg,
Yay.
and I will say yay. And so Jane, that passes unanimously 6-0 with one abstention of Commissioner Onaran. So next on our agenda are our public hearing items. First one is 6A, which is Village at the Peaks Conditional Use Site Plan Amendment, Steve's Goods Drive-Through, which is PZR 2021-4 with Senior Planner Hans Friedel. Hans, take it away.
All right, commissioners, well, good evening. My name is Hans Friedel, relatively new planner here, so nice to meet everybody virtually. Up for consideration tonight is a conditional use site plan amendment to allow Steve's Goods to resume using an existing drive-through at the Village at the Peaks Shopping Center. Go to next slide, please. I'm unable to see my slideshow right now.
Hans, give me just a second.
Sure,
Let me
sure,
pull that
sure.
up.
Take a pause here.
There you go.
Okay, perfect. So in terms of location, the subject property is located at 1264 South Hover Street. It's in the southwest corner of Village at the Peaks Shopping Center, just above the kind of Catawampas intersection of Hover Street and Ken Pratt Parkway. Access is provided via Clover Basin Drive, which is just on the west side, and that's really the only public street in there, to a network of internal private driveways. The Steve's Goods site itself is just under an acre in size and being operated as a CBD retail business that also provides smoothies. Surrounded by commercial uses, restaurants, retail, service, office, etc. Historically, it was a burger restaurant that was permitted. So the original site plan history goes back to 1984, but permitted, developed in 85. In more recent years, it was a Quiznos, which itself ceased operation in 2019. The mixed-use regional center zoning for the Village at the Peaks Shopping Center allows a whole host of commercial, retail, restaurant, entertainment type uses. Next slide, please. All right, in terms of existing conditions, as you can see, it's an operation, has new signage and some customers there when I took the pictures. The drive-through itself wraps around the west side or back of the building. So you're kind of looking at the front or east, kind of eastish elevation on the right. And then on the left picture, kind of looking south, you're actually looking down the drive-through. And that's the old order window for Quiznos or the burger restaurant there on that west side that's now currently boarded up. Next slide, please. So this is a conditional use site plan amendment to reuse the existing drive-through. The building itself is just under 3,000 square feet in size. In terms of some background information, the master site plan for the redevelopment of the Twin Peaks Mall, the Village at the Peaks conditional use site plan, limited the total number of drive-throughs to 3. This is what was approved on the plans. If approved, this would allow a 4th drive-through at the Village at the Peaks Shopping Center. Next slide, please. So the graphic on the right, shows the sort of orientation of those 3 existing drive-throughs, and then Steve's Goods down at the bottom there. When Quiznos closed, that 3rd drive-through that was, Steve's Goods, or Pad F, was reallocated to the Bank of America, which is just above it, with the number 3, or Pad E. And then that's up above it's Raising Canes and Culvers. So you kind of see the relationship there. Furthermore, what do you want to mention? There's a discontinuance provision in the code. So if a conditional use is discontinued for a year or more, that use lapses and becomes void. So a couple of layers there. And I do want to also mention as an FYI that to the lower right, Burger King and Taco Bell, though they both have drive-throughs that are really proximal to this, are not actually technically part of the master Village at the Peaks site conditional use site plan. So they're not part of that total allocation of drive-throughs, if you will. Next slide, please. So let's look at the site plan briefly. Again, this is reuse of an existing drive-through at an existing building. The drive-through itself has a counterclockwise movement. The DRC, we reviewed this against our current standards for stacking, turn radii, again, knowing that it was originally permitted back in 84, 85, turn radii, etc. And it does meet our standards in most ways. In terms of stacking, has 180 feet of stacking, so it's actually longer than that. The radii are fine for modern SUV, etc. We did have the applicant add directional arrows on the site plan for our code, so that's a requirement. There weren't currently any out there to keep people from going the wrong way into it. And also, we worked with the applicant to bring their proposed menu sign up to our design standards by adding a base to it, so it's more architecturally compatible with the building. So other than that, everything else meets our standards with it. And really the only changes they're making are putting the arrows to the drive-through and adding that sign. Next slide, please. As previously described, general retail is permitted use in the mixed-use regional center zoning district. Restaurants with a drive-through or similar type uses like the bank are conditional secondary uses in this area. Again, this proposal is to allow a 4th drive-through. Next slide, please. In terms of public process and noticing, so there was a virtual neighborhood meeting, which was held back in December. There were no callers, so no public feedback on this. Notices of the application we mailed out in March to all property owners within 1,000 feet. And again, notices of the public hearing were also mailed out, as well as signs posted. And we've received no public comments, calls, etc. Regarding this application. Next slide, please. Therefore, staff recommends PZ Resolution 2021-4A, recommending approval of conditional use site plan amendment. Next slide, please. So if there are no immediate questions, I'd like to introduce the owner, Steve, to go over his proposal in a little more detail to the commission.
Great, thank you, Hans. Yes, let's go ahead with the applicant's presentation, please.
1 second. Steve, you should have the ability to come on camera and unmute. There you are.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Hans. That was really awesome. That's definitely gonna be a better presentation than what I'm offering. I appreciate all the detail you put into that. All right, so I thank you everyone for coming today. I know this is a late hour, so I'll try to keep this brief. Steve's Goods is a local hemp company that's been working throughout Longmont for the last couple of years, and we're really trying to expand and offer Longmont a good place to go to experience not only local hemp products, but the best smoothies in town. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the smoothie shop off Francis Street, but I did acquire that, and I brought that over to this location because I really feel like this area just needs to be livened up. It's been closed for 9 years, and we're really trying to make this a bright space in the Village of the Peaks. Yeah, you can switch to the next slide. So yeah, so as I just said, Steve's Goods, we're a licensed hemp company that we're growing out of Fort Collins, but we're processing everything. We are manufacturing in our office off Kansas, and we are selling things at our retail space off 1264 South Hover Street. Now the smoothie shop's over there as well, and we really want to utilize this building for the smoothie shop primarily. The Steve's Goods is kind of a small little store compared to what the smoothie shop is, and if the drive-through is approved, then we'll definitely be able to utilize more of that space, especially in the back. That's all kind of closed because it used to be a drive-through. Next slide, please. So as you can see, a lot better from Hans's presentation. It's a perfect location for a drive-through. It used to be a drive-through, and we'd really love to bring it back so people can conveniently come in and get smoothies. We've been receiving a lot of traffic, and especially during the pandemic, it's good to socially distance, and we'd just a good location, and the menu is going to look great, and it's just it will just really add to the whole location. Whole Foods, they closed their juice bar. There isn't a lot of smoothie in this area, so I think it's a perfect location for a drive-through. Next slide. Again, you saw this on Han's slide. It's just a great directional. We're gonna add the arrows. It's just a really good flow for in and out for the drive-through, and as well as people that want to dine in or pull up. Next slide, please. And I just jotted some down. I've actually never done this before. I appreciate you guys all coming here. This is my first drive-through. Hopefully I can open up some more in the future and deal with you lovely people at city planning. But I just jotted down some things on why I think we should get a drive-through. Good for socially distancing. I'm going to create 5 jobs. There's no smoothies on Sundays. Our competitors are offering pre-made smoothies that are just kind of frozen, and we offer fresh smoothies. It's a safe location for drive-throughs. And I also just received a grant to revitalize this beautiful building, and I want to just add more investment to it. And I think that's going to come with a beautiful drive-through menu and a good flowing drive-through section. Next slide, please. This is what the building used to look like, and now it's super beautiful. If you guys live in Longmont, I'm sure you guys have seen it and just the changes it's made. And I personally have put a lot of money into this building, and I really want to see it succeed. And I think it looks a million times better, and people are coming in and they're having really great experiences, and we believe that drive-through will even liven this area up even more. Next slide, please. So I don't know, do you want me to read this and go through all of this from our architect?
You don't have to read it, but you do need to present it.
Okay, no problem. This is our lovely architects went over this, and this is for 1254 South Hover Street. The restrictions we have with Village of the Peaks only allowing a couple drive-throughs has limited us, so we've come to do the conditional use permit. We're not really changing anything at all. There's no changes to the drive-through other than adding a menu. There's really no changes like what Hans went over. That's really what this first page goes over. And then we are open 9 to 7. It's the summertime. We're opening up an hour early, especially with the drive-through. We're finding that people are coming there a lot after near dinner hour and wanting a good nice treat. I'm sorry, does that suffice for you, or do you want me to take another stab at it?
It's up to you. I can't really advise you. If we have questions, we'll continue to ask questions of you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for understanding. Next slide, please. Cool. Yeah, and this just goes over more details on the conditional use and how they're limited to the drive-through. and how we're asking for a conditional use permit and all that good stuff. Yeah, there's gonna be no developments, no changes. We just need a permit for the menu board itself. Yep, next slide, please. Oh, there's one more. But yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone's time and hearing us out for our conditional use permit.
Thank you, Mr. Schultheis. So we do have this as a public hearing item. So before we go into discussion about this, I'd like to open up the public hearing. If somebody, Susan, if we could put the slide up with the information. If anybody's out there who would like to speak to us about this particular item, now will be the time. So please dial 1-888-788-0099. When prompted, enter the meeting ID 837-8666-6906. When we're ready to hear your public comment, we will call on you to speak based on the last 3 digits of your phone number. Each speaker must state their name and address for the record and will be allowed 5 minutes to speak. Please remember to mute the live stream when you are called upon to speak. To do this, we need 5 minutes. So we'll take a 5-minute break, which according to my clock will bring us back at 7:31.
Hey, Jamie, are you on? Can you unmute? Let's test your mic. I was not able to do that before the meeting started.
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome, thanks. And Rocco, I am going to give you permission to unmute yourself. Let's test your mic.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay.
If you need to come on camera, we'll test your camera, I guess, at that time.
I'm sorry, I heard somebody else talking.
If you need to come on camera,
Okay.
we'll test your video at that time.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
I'm here.
All right, Chair, I'm going to go ahead and drop the slide and then we will give our live stream a few seconds to get caught up. We do have one caller that called in for this public hearing.
Great. Thank you, Susan. So with the caller whose number ends in 019, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
There you are. Can you please state your name and address for the record? You have-
Yeah, my name is Lawrence Bashir, and my
you may
address
want to
is 2
mute.
West,
You may want to
2
mute the
Western
live.
Sky Circle.
You may want to mute the live stream. I think I hear something in the background.
I did that already. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. You may begin.
I may have called in for the wrong section. I was calling in for the Irwin plan development.
Yes, that is, we're not on that item yet. So
Okay, all right.
if you want your comments to be included in the public record for that specific item, then we should stop you now and have you call in once we get to that.
Chair, we
Okay.
can just leave him in the meeting if he would like.
Okay.
I'll just mute him again and we'll make note.
Okay,
Very good.
great. Thank you, Mr. Bashir. We'll see you in a bit.
All right.
So
Share that.
Susan, there are no other callers then, correct?
That is correct. You may continue.
Okay, great. So we'll go back to questions from the commission. Commissioner Poland.
Yeah, Hans, can you tell us why, when this was originally set up, why there was a limit for only 3 drive-throughs? Is there a particular reason for that, or was that more just kind of a, I don't want to say a shot in the dark, but just a number that they put out there?
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I did a little research on that. What I've been able to turn up is it was just relates to the original site plan, conditional use. They showed that many pad sites where they were the applicant back in the day, was like 2015, was proposing that many pad sites for drive-throughs. And so this adding an additional one warrants amending that original conditional approval for the old one. So I think there was some, in terms of why the shopping center doesn't have more or something like that. I think the intent was for it to be kind of a walkable mixed use sort of redevelopment of the old mall, that sort of thing. But I think it just was literally what they proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Probably with tenants in mind that they had when they were doing that development.
Hans, as a follow-up to Commissioner Poland's question, is there anything from a traffic point of view that makes it a problem to have more than 3? I mean, I know we have Tyler Stamey here too, so if he wanted to chime in.
Yeah, we went through the whole DRC review with this, including public works review and natural resources. And the comments we had from them were related to sort of the turn radii in the parking area with our transportation and the arrows and stuff. If they'd like to chime in on, why this didn't warrant an additional traffic impact study or something, I'd be happy to hear that. But I think my understanding is the volumes were just expected to be too low to warrant that sort of review.
Okay. Actually, Tyler, if you could chime in on that and just kind of let us know your opinion about a 4th drive-through instead of just 3.
Sure. I think just the nature of the prior fast food use to a current fast food use, the difference in previous trip generation to what's being proposed is relatively nominal. So from my perspective, from new trips, it may not be there. I think the gentleman with the project mentioned it's been closed for about 9 years. So those trips have gone away, but they were there at one point. I think that the system, the network that's there is adequate to handle the traffic that this would generate.
Okay, thank you, Tyler.
Chair, I just want to let Steve know that we lost Lance from his team. He's not in the meeting anymore for some reason.
Okay, so if the applicant needs Lance Keiko to come back to the meeting, he should contact him?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Actually, so I do have a question for the applicant. I know we just tasked him with contacting his architect. So,
Yes.
okay, Mr. Schulteis, I noticed in your presentation that you had a statement at the bottom of one of your slides saying the building will not survive without a drive-through. Can you explain that more to me? I mean, if there's no drive-through, why would the building not survive?
Yeah, okay. I guess it was just an overall empowerment statement really for us, because I feel like the whole, I feel like it's kind of a dead zone. It's kind of just stuck in the middle. It's behind Whole Foods. It's kind of like in the back of things. And I really feel like it needs the drive-through to bring, I'm sorry, he's texting me right now. We'll need to bring the drive-through in to really bring that place to life, because I mean, I really want this business to succeed. And I know that we need the extra revenue from the drive-through. The rent's expensive and the whole building itself is underutilized. And I feel like if it doesn't have a drive-through, we're just never going to be able to bring enough traffic there to really, keep that in business. I have at least 3 more years on it, but I'd like to sign another 5, but it's going to be really hard if I'm just stuck with pickup orders.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that it financially doesn't pencil out for you in the long term if you can't draw the drive-through traffic.
Yeah, that's correct. And that was a big reason why I brought the smoothie shop over and kind of developed this whole idea, to have 2 businesses in there to obtain 2 revenues. And, it has been picking up a little bit in the summer, but I just, I do worry about that. And I also want to offer Longmont a good, fast, effective way to get a smoothie, seeing how we're just coming out of COVID and everyone's trying to get into better shape and all that good stuff. So, trying to help out, but go ahead.
Sorry. Another question that you just made me think of was, so is the only thing that's being sold out of the drive-through window itself are the smoothies? You mentioned in one of your slides that it's the smoothie shop takes up like 2/3 of the building. Can you give me some idea as to what's going on there as well?
Yeah, so it's really up to planning. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I'm not really sure about, because I've actually talked to Brian Bradley, the mayor, and he said that the CBD shouldn't be an issue through the drive-through. But ideally, we want to do the hemp-derived CBD as well as smoothies through. But I completely understand if it's only smoothies, because hemp's still new and this and that. But I would hope to be able to do both. But it's mainly going to be focused on smoothies. Like, people aren't going to drive up and buy CBD. They need to speak to someone. They want to be educated. So it's just not really an easy sell there. But the smoothies will be the main attraction.
Okay, thank you.
And Chair,
Yes,
sorry to interrupt, but we do have Lance back in the meeting.
great. Okay, super. Thank you. Commissioner Flagg.
Thank you, Chair. I think I have a question for Tyler Stamey in regards to the intersection there out on South Hover at Clover Basin. Currently, there is no dedicated light for turning left off of Hover onto Clover Basin towards this proposed, toward the smoothie shop and all the businesses in that area. So I'm wondering what kind of traffic impact will be felt should we approve this and the smoothie shop does pick up and generate the kind of business that is hoped for, and what would it take to have that dedicated left turn arrow?
Chair Shernick, Commissioner Flagg, apologize if I forgot to introduce myself earlier. Tyler Stamey, City of Longmont Public Works Engineering. As I mentioned, this project didn't submit a traffic study, just with the prior use and the current use being relatively similar. I can say the city is working on a design project for the Hover Street corridor from Ken Pratt and Hover to the intersection of Nelson. And every intersection within that segment would be improved. And We are showing left turn improvements or protected turn movements for the left turns with those improvements. It's one that's in our CIP, not a fully funded CIP at this point, but it is something that's under design and moving forward. Not a direct answer to the question, but there are some plans to make some improvements at this intersection through current CIP projects.
Thank you.
Commissioner Height?
And I think I'll ask Tyler because Tyler didn't look at this that closely, but I want to confirm that the intersection of Clover Basin and I guess the road that accesses this property without going up into the Twin Peaks circular drive on the site plan. I guess I'm looking at page 1 of 6. I just want to confirm the one-way circular pattern to use the drive-through. Is that also just a left only onto this road that connects to Clover Basin? I don't know, Hans, do you know what I'm speaking of? The way the property is situated off of Clover Basin, there's an access road that comes off of Clover Basin, but I think that road is only one way.
It is. If we can pull up the PowerPoint or map or something, we can kind of I can point to that, just so I can confirm we're talking about the same thing here. The one on the, well, wait till it pulls up. It's on the PowerPoint. The second slide, I think, has the sort of vicinity map. Previous. That little one down right, Commissioner, just right at the bottom there, south of Steve's Goods. That driveway.
So
that is a one-way drive.
Okay, that's a one-way drive coming out. Great. And is the roadway the lower right-hand corner there? Oh, that's the left-hand corner, sorry. Lower left-hand corner. So below the S, that roadway as it comes off of Clover Basin Road, is that one way? Is there any possibility of somebody being confused and driving into the exit ramp of this drive-through?
And Tyler may want to weigh in on this. When I was out there, the last time I was out there taking pictures, if you're at the southeast corner of the subject property, so like the red polygon, in that little intersection of east, the other corner. There you go. If you're over there, somewhere in that little area, and I don't know exactly if it's on the south or the north side, that I don't recall. But on those private drives, there's a one-way I recall seeing a one-way do not enter sign there. So that would, yeah. So I don't know if people could come in there and go the wrong way. However, they are putting arrows on the drive-through. One of the reasons there'll be an exit arrow on the drive-through lane there so that people will know they're going against the flow of the arrow.
Okay, appreciate that. My next question is, so this is an amendment of a conditional use review because we originally approved it for 3 drive-through pads. This is an amendment to 4. Is there a different standard at all, or is it the same standard to grant a conditional use review as opposed to amending a conditional use review? And Attorney Tate, that might be a question for you. I didn't look it up myself.
Attorney Tate is out sick. This is Jamie Roth, Senior Assistant City Attorney, and I'm afraid I don't have that answer off the top of my head, and I hope that someone else on the call may know.
We might throw that over to Glenn Van Nemwegen or to Don Burchett, who are on the call.
Yeah, I guess I'm assuming this is just like any new conditional use. We don't have a different standard based on the number in a shopping center. So am I correct, Don?
The review criteria for a new or an amended conditional use would be the exact same review criteria. And the design standards that Hans went through with the stacking and the other items that he covered in his presentation would be the same, whether it's for a brand new use or whether it's a use that we're amending an existing conditional use site plan for.
Okay. Don and Glenn, before you go away, I'll want to ask you a question, but I think Commissioner Height has a follow-up to what you just said. No, he's okay. All right. Wanted to ask you both a question. One of our review criteria is compatibility, and Mr. Schulteis said, you know, it's mostly going to be smoothies going out the drive-through window. Does the city actually have any care in the world as to what the product is that goes through a drive-through window? Is that even anywhere on the city council's radar, anybody's radar?
Chairman Chernak, what I can say is that the concern that we would have would be if it was not CBD. So if it was a marijuana product with any THC in it that was above the state requirement, then that would require a retail license, of which we only have the 4 in the city of Longmont, and there are no more licenses. So that would be our concern. That would be the police department's concern. But if it's CBD, then you can pick that up at almost many of the products that have that, even at most of the gas stations in town and various other retail stores. So CBD is not a problem. It is truly the level of THC that qualifies as a marijuana product.
Okay, thank you, Don. Any Commissioner Goldberg?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. You know, Chairman, I don't have any issues with this project, and I'm feeling slighted by Chairman Poland for asking me the one question I did come with, which was why is there a limit, or what is the kind of the backstory on having a limit to the number of drive-throughs on the plot? So maybe before I pivot to a motion, I might just want to, given some recent discussion, Mr. Schulteis, would you mind just confirming, based on the recent discussion, that in addition to the smoothies, the products that you're offering and might pass through that drive-through is CBD, not breaking that THC threshold to become a marijuana product that Don was just referencing?
Yes, 100%. So yeah, so we're a registered hemp company. We grow hemp in Fort Collins, like I said, and the Department of Agriculture actually comes out and they actually clip our plants to make sure that they are below 0.3%. And then when we're formulating our products, we're also getting lab reports. Currently, right now, we're working with a lab in Florida that's DEA registered. So yes, we have all that, and anyone that comes into our retail space can get lab reports. But yeah, I would never do that. It's foolish. I would never do that. It's only hemp products, only what we sell on our website. And I honestly don't think we would sell much hemp through it. I think it's mainly going to be smoothies, and maybe like they want a boost or something of a hemp oil in their smoothie, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of sales of that. But 100%, it's going to be below 0.3% THC, 100%.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Schulteis.
Yeah,
I think with that, Chairman, then, you know, I think given the fact that the application before us has met the review criteria A through F that's been outlined in the packet, given the cooperation from the applicant to update the menu board, drop in the arrows to help with that drive-through direction, given the space was previously a drive-through and a setup for that, I'm really having trouble finding any reason not to approve it. So I guess with that, I'd go ahead and move that we approve PZR 2021-4A, which is approving the conditional site plan amendment application.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldberg. Commissioner Poland.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we had a motion to approve 2021-4A by Commissioner Goldberg, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Poland. Commissioner Poland, further comments?
Yes, I just want to add to that. Like Josh, I do find that it meets the criteria A through F. I also think that for this given area, it is a good fit for the area. That building has been not used for 9 years. It's getting a good new fresh start. Where the drive-through is, that it really isn't in by the other pads, given the area that the whole mall area takes up. So it is kind of offset from that. Maybe if it had been up by where Canes is and a couple of the other places are, and we'd have 4 in that area, in that immediate area, I might give a little bit of a pause. But considering that this is behind Whole Foods, that's kind of distance from those other areas, I have no problems with putting a drive-through in at that part of the mall. So I think it's a great project, and I'm for it.
Great. I'll throw in my 2 cents. I echo what Commissioners Goldberg and Poland said, but I also appreciate the fact that the applicant is taking a building that's been vacant for 9 years and is bringing it back to life. That fits with some of our sustainability goals for the city. And this was an urban renewal area in general. And so bringing this building back to life, so to speak, fits with our goals in that regard too. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and take a vote. Commissioner Height?
I vote in favor.
Commissioner Poland?
In favor.
Commissioner Flagg?
In favor.
Commissioner Goldberg?
In favor.
Okay, Commissioner Onaron?
In favor.
Commissioner Teta?
In favor.
And I will say yes. Okay, so that
Thank
passes.
you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. That's awesome. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Schulteis. I do need to read a statement here before everybody goes. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period, which begins Thursday, May 20 at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, May 26 at 5 p.m. Hans, thank you for your time and work on this. Again, Mr. Schulteis, thank you for presenting and bringing your team with you. We will move on to our next item. But before we do, Jane, I just want to state for the record that that vote was 7-0, 7 yes, no opposed. Okay, we'll move on to item 6B, which is the Irwin Thomas Comprehensive Plan Land Use Amendment, Rezoning, Concept Plan Amendment, and Preliminary Subdivision Plat, PZR 2021-5 with Principal Planner Brian Schumacher. Brian.
Hey, good evening, Commissioners. Brian Schumacher here with Planning Development Services. Susan and Jane, can you start the presentation slides? All right, well, thanks again, Commissioners. Again, I'm Brian Schumacher with Planning Development Services, and tonight is the public hearing for the Irwin Thomas Comprehensive Plan Amendment, Rezoning, Concept Plan Amendment, and Preliminary Subdivision Plat. Next slide, please. So this slide notes staff that are available for questions this evening in addition to the applicant consultants. So for planning related and process questions, that'll be me and Don if need be. Chris and Jim are available to respond to engineering related questions, including streets, water and sewer utilities, storm drainage and water quality. Tyler again is available for traffic related questions. Rocco is available for electric power and communications questions. Captain Goldman is available for emergency services if there's any questions regarding environmental assessments. And then we had planned to have Dan Wolford here from Natural Resources, but I don't think Dan is logged in yet. So we'll see if he's able to join a little bit later. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows a general location for the project, quick overview of the location of the property in southeast Longmont. Obviously, it's included on both the north and south side of Highway 119. East of Martin Street, it's east of the Harvest Junction residential and commercial neighborhood. And then west of 119th Street, north of Quail Road, south of St. Brian Creek, and then east of Left Hand Creek. Next slide, please. So a few notes on this slide. So there's a set of hearing applications and there's also a set of administrative applications. So tonight, the commission is reviewing the hearing applications. And those include the comprehensive plan land use amendment, the rezoning, concept plan amendment, and the preliminary subdivision plat. And the majority of the changes associated with the hearing applications affect the western 70 acres. That includes the land use changes, the zoning changes, and shifting the mining to the east to allow for the commercial and residential development. And as part of the applicant's presentation, they'll provide more details regarding the hearing applications as part of their presentation slides. But I just also wanted to note that in addition to the hearing applications this evening, there are also administrative applications that include the final subdivision plat, the PUD plan amendment, the public improvement plans, and the Costco site plan. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief summary of prior planning actions by both Boulder County and the city. And so this property has been part of the Longmont area and Envision Longmont comprehensive plan for quite a while. It was originally included in the comprehensive plan in the 1980s, and it was anticipated to be developed as part of the city's urban fabric. And then in 2002, 2003, a mining plan was approved by Boulder County, and it also included a vested right associated with that mining plan. And I believe some of the commission members may recall when this property was annexed in 2018, in conjunction with the annexation of the property, there was also a PUD mining plan that was run concurrent with the annexation that the commission reviewed and approved at that time. So the primary changes regarding mining with this proposal is that there's a proposal to remove the western portion of the property from mining. And that's intended to accommodate the commercial development and the affordable housing development sooner, as opposed to waiting for the mining to occur on that portion of the property sooner. Another change is to change the mining cell sequence, and I think Barb Brunk, as a part of the applicant team, will provide a quick overview on that. And then also reduce the buffer from Highway 119. The proposal on the south side of Highway 119 is to reduce the setback buffer for the mining cells from 200 feet to 100 feet, and that's subject to CDOT and state approval. Next slide, please. So the city and property owners and Costco entered into an agreement regarding a public-private ownership. And as part of the staff report and the communication, I provided some information and a link if the commission was interested in reviewing that materials to the council packet from December when that agreement was approved. So this partnership will invest in the infrastructure required to serve the proposed development, including the proposed Costco warehouse. And as part of the agreement as well, the city will also acquire a 9-acre lot on the south side of the Costco lot that will be used for future affordable housing. Next slide, please. So as part of the review process for the hearings, obviously there's a requirement for notice of surrounding property owners, as well as occupants of rental properties as well. And so when we did the notice for the neighborhood meeting, which occurred about last December, and then subsequently sent notice also with the notice of application, and then more recently for the notice for the public hearing this evening, the typical notice area is 1,000 foot for major development applications. But for this particular application, in addition to the 1,000-foot notice was also sent to all the property owners of record and vacant lots in the Harvest Junction Village subdivision to the west. And then also notice was provided to all the occupants of the adjacent Watermark apartments that was immediately adjacent to the west of the site. Next slide, please. So this slide just outlines instances where there have been or will be opportunities for public input on the project. So obviously, as I mentioned, we had the neighborhood meeting in this past December. We sent out notice of application in January after the application was submitted. The notice for the public hearing for this evening was sent out in early May. Obviously, we're having the public hearing this evening to get input from the community. And for a couple of future meetings, there will be a notice for city council meetings upcoming. There will be 2 2 meetings with city council, a first reading and introduction of an ordinance, and then also a public hearing on the ordinance as well. So again, we'll send out notice of the public hearing for city council in June, and then the formal public hearing will be in July. And right now it's tentatively scheduled for July 13th. Next slide, please. Oh, and also, just before I get on to this next slide, I also just wanted to mention, in addition to the public hearing applications that the commission is reviewing this evening, as I mentioned before, there's also some administrative applications that are being reviewed as well. And there's also, we've sent out notices regarding those applications to surrounding property owners and renters as well. So if they have an interest, anybody has an interest in reviewing the plans, commenting on those, contacting staff. If they have questions, they can certainly reach out to me or any of the other staff on this call to discuss the proposal. So as part of the review process and soliciting input from surrounding property owners and just other members of the public, this slide just identifies, and this is included in the staff communication as well, but it just kind of outlines some of the more substantive comments that were provided, either through the neighborhood meeting process or when the notice of applications was sent out. And these are emails primarily that were included in the packet for the commission. They were also part of the neighborhood meeting summary that was included in the packet as well. In addition to this list, also wanted to mention, and I believe the commission received this afternoon, there was one email that staff received from Sarah Hamilton that was forwarded to the commission. And in her email, she expressed concern about the proximity of the regional center land use near the residential neighborhood and potential traffic and noise impacts associated with that proximity. And also, I just wanted to let you know that I also chatted this afternoon with Ruby Bowman about the proposal and responded to some of her questions about plans on the city open space parcel north of Highway 119. She just wanted to know if there were still plans to mine and reclaim on the city open space parcel north of Highway 119, and I provided that information to Ms. Bowman. Next slide, please. So as part of the DRC review process, staff conducted 3 reviews before this item was scheduled before the commission. So this slide just lists some of those primary discussion topics as part of that review. Obviously, the first one is street design and Highway 119 right-of-way improvements. Obviously, we're continuing to coordinate with CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation, regarding Highway 119 improvements. Another topic was infrastructure design and emergency services, general site design and layout, and then also environmental assessment and conservation plan review. And I'll provide a little more detail on the following slides. So next slide, please. So regarding transportation considerations, so based on the traffic study that was included in the packet, this development of this property is not expected to have an adverse impact on the level of service and the transportation benchmark. So roadway improvements include, there will be a full movement signalized intersection at Highway 119 and the north-south collector street, which is called Harvest Moon Drive on the east side of the Costco lot. There'll also be a right-in, right-out access from Highway 119 on the west side of Lot 1, which is the lot that'll include the Costco warehouse. And then Harvest Moon Drive will be designed as a collector street. And then as part of that design, there's 2 traffic circles at the primary intersections along that street segment. And then future transportation improvements east of Harvest Moon Drive will be reviewed with the future subdivision plats and site plans after the mining is completed and reclamation has concurred on that site. Obviously, that whole area east of Harvest Moon Drive is designated as, there's several land use designations shown on the proposed land use amendment plan. There's a mixed use corridor land use, there's residential mixed neighborhood, and then there's residential single family. And obviously that development would occur after mining occurred and reclamation has been completed on that, after the mining has been done. So next slide, please. So for other infrastructure and services, future development will be required to comply with city code requirements, and that includes multimodal and pedestrian connections. So there are plans for, as each individual site develops, as well as the subdivision develops, there'll be requirements for pedestrian connections internally and then also to the external trail system, both along the public streets as well as connections to the greenway trails along both Left Hand Creek and St. Vrain Creek. So utility improvements will be required, meeting city requirements, including water, sewer, electric communications, storm drainage, and water quality design. Utility capacity is anticipated to be adequate for the development, and emergency response times will comply with the city's benchmark. And obviously, there's a lot more details on each of these topics in the communication. Next slide, please. So associated with the subdivision and site design, so the Highway 119 frontage will include landscaping consistent with the Highway 119 landscape guidelines and gateway buffer requirements. And as each site develops, they'll need to comply with site design compliance standards, including landscaping and buffering, screening, noise compliance, and other design requirements associated with the land development code. And then, as I mentioned, when mining is complete east of Harvest Moon Drive, future development will need to comply with applicable residential compatibility standards, including appropriate transitioning, buffer standards at the time of the property develops. Next slide, please. So in terms of environmental protections, there was a habitat and species conservation plan that was included as part of the application, which was a requirement for the submittal. And as part of that, our natural resources staff did review the plan as well as other staff. And as noted in the staff communication, the plan did not identify any threatened or endangered species or habitat or wetlands or waters of the US subject to federal regulation. And then natural resources staff reviewed the plan and generally agreed with the findings and recommendations of the report. Next slide, please. In addition, with the submittal, there was also a environmental site assessment included with the packet. Actually, there was two. One was the 2015 report that was reviewed with the annexation. And then there was a subsequent environmental site assessment that was submitted in 2020 associated with just the Costco site. And based on the information provided in both the original 2015 report as well as the subsequent 2020 Costco site plan, there was no evidence of environmental conditions on the property that would require additional investigation. And so staff did not require any additional assessment submittals other than the two reports that were included in the packet. Next slide, please. So this slide includes a few procedural notes. The applicant's presentation will address the criteria in more detail. Obviously, per code, the applicant is responsible for demonstrating that the application meets the review criteria and municipal code standards. The commission is the decision-making body on the preliminary subdivision plat. Council is decision-making body on the comprehensive plan amendment, rezoning, and concept plan amendment. Next slide, please. So based on staff's analysis, the review criteria, as noted in the communication, staff found the application to meet the criteria and is recommending approval as noted in PZ Resolution 2021 5B. And the one condition in the 5B resolution is that the preliminary subdivision plat approval by the commission is subject to council approval of the comprehensive plan land use amendment, rezoning, and concept plan amendment. Next slide, please. So this slide just outlines the next steps in tonight's hearing. Next, we'll have the applicant presentation, and Barb Brunk will be presenting for the applicant. Then we'll open the public hearing. After the public hearing, there'll be questions for the applicant and staff. After that, there'll be commission deliberation, and then commission vote, motion and a vote. And then the commission's decision will be forwarded to the city council. And as I mentioned before, Tentative council dates right now are first reading on June 29th, and then second reading and the public hearing on July 13th. And I believe that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to respond to any questions, or if we'd like to just go on to the applicant's presentation, we can do that and then have questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, Brian. Actually, I need to ask Jamie Roth, our city attorney. We've got a little bit of housekeeping to deal with. It appears we've lost Commissioner Flagg at some point. She no longer is attending the meeting. And Commissioner Height, your video is off. I don't know if you have been in on the last bit of the presentation or not. So Attorney Roth, my question to you is, if Commissioner Flagg has missed part of the presentation and but is able to come back into the meeting, can she still be seated?
I believe she can. And I know there is a quorum at this point. I think we should maybe wait and see what happens with her. And if she comes back, we can then revisit at that time.
Okay. And Commissioner Hyde, it's kind of the same issue. I just want to make sure that you feel that you haven't missed much of the meeting. Your camera.
I haven't missed any of the meeting. I just turned my video on. Thanks.
Okay. All right, great. So Brian, let's go ahead and go with the applicant's presentation.
And Chair, give us just a minute. Let me see if we need to let Commissioner Haig back in, or Flagg back in, because our meeting is locked. And so she wouldn't have gotten in. And I do not see any emails. Jane, do you? She is trying to get in. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to unlock the meeting here. Let's give her just a moment, Chair.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. We just let her in. Give us just a minute to get her renamed. Give us just a minute, Commissioner Flagg. All right. And you should be able to unmute yourself, Commissioner Flagg.
I did. Thank you.
All right, perfect.
Right.
Let me
Welcome
pull
back.
let me pull up the next presentation if you're ready to continue.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Chernak, Barb Brunk, Resource Conservation Partners, PO Box 1522, Longmont, Colorado, 80503. I am here this evening with Reggie Golden from Diamond G Concrete Company, Drew Golden from Golden Farm, LLLP, a sampling of representatives of our TST Consulting Engineers Design Team, including Brian Williamson, Don Toronto, and James Bruntz, and Deanna Salazar Chu from Costco. So we'll be here throughout the meeting to answer any questions that you have. Next slide. I know Brian kind of went through this, but this is where we are in the world. Again, Highway 119, Martin Street to the west, Quail Road to the south, 119th Street to the east, and St. Vrain Creek along the north. The other thing here is the adjacent land uses. So you can see the apartments and the continuing residential development on the west side of the property, the rural residential and agricultural along the southern boundary, the basically farmland across North 119th Street headed to the east, and then open space and St. Vrain Creek along the north side of the property. Next slide. So this is the big picture. I know Brian went through this, but these are the images that help tell that story. So we're looking at an amendment to the comprehensive plan, a rezoning application, an amendment to the concept plan, and a preliminary plat. So the top left slide shows the area that land use is changing. So that red dashed line around the regional center and the multifamily residential and the mixed use corridor shows the land use amendment components. The slide below that shows the portion of the property that will be rezoned to accommodate the land use amendment. And so that portion will be removed from the PUD. The remainder of the property will stay in the PUD so that it can be mined and reclaimed. And then the concept plan amendment will remove a portion of the mining from the PUD and from the mining boundary inside the concept plan. So again, that property will be developed first, as opposed to waiting until the property is mined and reclaimed. Next slide. So Brian kind of went through a little of this about the history of the land. I think there's been some confusion in the public regarding the ultimate land use for this property. And Brian's memo says 1980. I went back and looked for comp plans, and the earliest one I could find a picture of was 2010. And at the time, it was industrial economic development, medium density residential, and low density residential. And again, it was contemplated for development within the city of Longmont. Land use changed when Envision Longmont was adopted, so that the portion north of the highway was changed to Parks, Greenway, and open space, and the portion south of the highway is pretty much residential, including mixed neighborhood and rural neighborhood. And then when we annexed the property, we amended it again. The parcel north of the roads remained Parks, Greenway, and open space, but south of the road, we made a more diverse mix of uses to include some mixed use employment along the highway, mixed neighborhood, and single family neighborhood. Again, there's been some misinformation out in the public that this property was going to be mined, reclaimed, and converted to a park. And it's unfortunate that that was shared with the public, but that has never been true and has never shown up on any maps or things that I am aware of. Next slide. So this is the land use amendment. On the top is the existing land use. So it's the mixed use employment, mixed neighborhood, and single family neighborhood. And then the slide below shows the conversion to regional center, multifamily neighborhood, mixed neighborhood, the mixed use corridor along the highway, and then the residential to the east. And you can see on the map that the single family residential really didn't change. The parts that changed were along the highway, and then the mix of uses to add additional diversity to the housing stock. And you'll see that the land use amendment map does not include the portion of the property north of the road. That property is owned by the city of Longmont. So we are not changing the land use on that portion of the property. It will remain as parks, greenways, and open space. Next slide. So this is the summary of how that land use works out. We will end up with 26 acres of regional center, 16 acres of multifamily neighborhood. Again, a portion of that is where the 9 acres the city is going to purchase is located. We'll have 22 acres of mixed use corridor and 16 acres total, 38 acres of mixed neighborhood, and then 102 acres of single family. Next slide. So this is kind of the images that demonstrate the proposal for the concept plan amendment. So the row of pictures along the top is the existing approved concept plan. The row of pictures along the bottom is the proposal before you. So you can see for phase 1, the mining is removed. About that 70 acres on the western edge of the property will be removed from the PUD, no longer mined, and it'll become regional commercial, a place for multifamily, and a place for mixed neighborhood. So the mining is moved in that instance, to the east, away from the existing residential development on the western side of the property. Then phase 2, you can see above is the reclamation plan. And you'll see that if you look below, the pond is missing, and that's because that's not going to be mined. So again, during phase 2, we'll have the regional center, multifamily, and mixed neighborhood. And what this amendment does is allow that western 70 acres to develop while the property is being mined and reclaimed. And then you can see at the end, the existing land use and the proposed, again, north of the highway, no change. It's still parks, greenways, and open space. Along the highway, it's a combination of regional center and mixed use corridor. And then the residential uses, we've added multifamily to the mix and reconfigured the mixed neighborhood. And again, the single family matches on both slides. Next slide, please. Again, this is just the numbers of those things. What's interesting to me is we've rearranged the parts, and phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, when you get to the end, the total number of, if we use the average units, is 886 units of residential and about 476,000 square feet of commercial and mixed use. And that is concentrated in the regional center and the mixed use along the corridor. Next slide. So this is the story about the rezoning. So again, the property was zoned planned unit development at the time it was annexed to allow for mining and reclamation. If this is approved this evening, we will take a portion of that out of the PUD and rezone it to regional center, multifamily neighborhood, and mixed neighborhood. The remainder of the property, including the city's ground, which is zoned PUD as well, will stay within the PUD until the property is mined and reclaimed, because under the city code, that's the only place we can mine. So that's why that was done at the time the property was annexed. Next slide. This is the summary of the rezoning. So adjacent to the highway is a regional center. It's a little more than 27 acres. We have the multifamily, which is about 18. And the western 9 acres of that residential multifamily is where the cities will own for the affordable housing, and then mixed residential about 24 acres to the south. That is also the area that will be included in the preliminary plat. Next slide. So what you have before you this evening, this is the 4th application, is an 11 lot preliminary plat. And as Brian said, it's the framework, and it includes in the application materials, utility design, landscape design, grading and drainage, all of the circulation things, all of those things necessary to understand that the property can be developed within the code. The important thing there, I think, for people listening is to know that this is a preliminary plat, and all of these parcels will go through an additional review, as Brian said in his presentation, that will have final plats, final public improvement plans, and final site plans for each of the uses within the proposed preliminary plat area. Next slide. This is the multimodal kind of big picture connection plan. So this site is really well located for the people who will live and work here to be able to use their bikes and their feet to get around in the world. We have underpasses at St. Vrain Greenway under Highway 119, at the Left-Hand Creek Greenway under Highway 119, and one under North 119th Street. So as this property develops, there will be a bike path along on the south side of Highway 119, along the north side of the property. And then we'll also have internal along the collector streets and in each individual parcel, pedestrian-friendly streets. So the collector has a detached sidewalk and on-site bike lanes. And then as each one of those site plans develops, there'll be additional connections. And Brian kind of referenced that in his presentation as well. Next slide. This is how we fit into the overall City of Longmont multimodal plan. So the black star is the property. So you'll see under the proposed improvements that the site is adjacent to Highway 119. And part of these applications includes turn lanes and a traffic signal on the Highway 119 corridor adjacent to the property. For planned transit, there's a planned regional transit center to the northeast of this site. And again, Those underpasses and the trail system that we will build and that will be developed in the future make this a really great place for people to be able to use their feet or their bikes to get to a transit center. So maybe in the future, we'll have less cars in this part of the city. Then those two to the south are really the connections to the pedestrian network and the vehicular network, the bike path network. And again, those show the existing things. As this site develops, we'll add more of those, and those details will come through the final plans. Next slide. As Brian said, it's our job to demonstrate that we meet the criteria for approval. So both the staff memorandum and the letter from the applicant to the commissioners specifically list and outline in detail how this project meets the criteria. I would like to make sure that those, both the staff report and the letter from the applicant, are included as part of the public record for this hearing, so that that analysis of the review criteria is included as we move forward this evening. I'm not going to read each one, but I am going to go through and hit the highlights about how this project complies with the criteria. And then if there's anything that the commission wants to go back and look at specifically, we're happy to do that, or to answer questions as we go forward through the application. So really the first thing when you look at review criteria is, are we compatible and do we comply with the envisioned Longmont? If the land use amendment is approved, this site is consistent with the envisioned Longmont plan. It fits into the envisioned Longmont growth framework, and it furthers specific goals and policies regarding growth of the community, diversity of housing opportunities, provision of affordable housing, economic development to create jobs and diversify our economy, and protection of natural resources. Next slide. I think affordable housing is on everyone's mind as in this time of the world, as everything keeps getting more expensive. And the unique thing about this public-private partnership is that between the city and the landowner, we're going to provide the infrastructure for future affordable housing. So a piece is set aside, the city will buy 9 acres, and a cooperative agreement between the landowner and the city will build the infrastructure. So all of the streets and utilities and drainage improvements, all those things required to serve the commercial development will also serve the affordable housing. So at the time the city is ready to go forward with that project, streets, water, sewer, utilities will all be in place. So it'll be positioned for that development to move forward. Next slide. This is really about business recruitment. And again, this is the city and the retailer and the landowner have entered into an agreement to bring commercial development to town so that it will help grow our economy, provide jobs, provide infrastructure for other development in the neighborhood, and a collaborative effort to be able to provide a more diverse kind of housing in this part of the community. Next slide. So this is again about the public-private partnership. So again, in the big picture, it's to accommodate the Costco and additional commercial development, prepare for the affordable housing, and then increase the setback between the existing residences and the gravel mining. Next slide. This is the big picture drainage plan from the preliminary plat. So the preliminary plat is submitted, meets the criteria and the standards as outlined in the code. You'll see the details of that in the preliminary public improvement plans that were submitted with the application and the staff review of the criteria. So we are not needing exceptions. We are meeting the standards for utilities, streets, drainage, water quality, landscaping, all of those things relative to the infrastructure and the improvements required as part of preliminary plat are included in your packet and have been reviewed by staff. There are adequate utilities to serve the property, and this applicant will extend services to connect to the infrastructure on the perimeter of the site to loop the water line and make that connection between Highway 119 and Quail Road. And you can see those traffic circles on this map where the first one is for the entry into the commercial, regional commercial. And then the next one makes the connection on Bountiful that will connect east-west to Martin Street into the existing roundabout at Martin. And eventually it'll connect down to Quail Road. So this is there's more than one way in and out to disperse the traffic and make sure that it works in the neighborhood. Next slide. The other big thing about review criteria is compatibility. And if you look at this application, there are kind of two sets of compatibility issues. One is about the gravel mining. And all of those things were reviewed at the time of annexation, but I just wanted to point out that a couple of things. So the development of the western 70 acres pushes the gravel mining away from the existing residences to the west. So it increases the setback between the mining and those homes and apartments. In addition, as part of the perimeter screening on the gravel mining, the berms that were supposed to be located along the western property line have now been relocated so that they run along the Harvest Moon Parkway, so that again, as this property develops, there's a screening berm so that the gravel mining is there. And then all of the provisions about the screening and berms and setbacks between the gravel mining and the existing rural residential homes on Quail Road are still in place. Those have not changed as a result of this application. And all of the mining and reclamation and setback things relative to the portion of the property north of the highway have not changed. So really the changes are to the south of the highway. The other thing that Brian talked about was two of those cells. So the mining will now start adjacent to Harvest Moon and work from west to east. So that larger one is cell 1, cell 2, down to cell 3, to cell 4, and then it crosses the highway to 5 and 6. And then cell 7 is the easternmost cell, and that's last because the access as part of that IGA between Boulder County and the city of Longmont, the mining access will cross 119th Street and run down Quicksilver Road now. So it's not planned to turn. There's no mining access onto Highway 119. And there's the only access onto North 119th Street is that cross traffic that will happen. And that's the primary access. So that's about mining compatibility. The other compatibility is with land development and adjacent land uses. And I think a couple of things. Along the western edge of the regional center, the bonus ditch runs there in a north-south. So between the apartments and the regional center, there's a bonus ditch corridor, and then there'll be on-site buffering required as part of the land development that'll show up in the site plan review when we do the Costco. The rest of these, the multifamily, the mixed residential, all the rest of those properties will provide appropriate buffers at the time they're developed. I know there's been some conversation between the neighbors along Quail Road and the buffer between the Quail Road residents and the single family residents. The bonus ditch runs along the backside of those lots and will continue to be there for the foreseeable future. So at the time that single family neighborhood develops, there'll be a preliminary plat. We'll be back in front of Planning Commission and we'll be figuring out how to integrate that ditch corridor into a buffer between and connectivity between those rural residential properties to the south and the single family development that will happen to the north of them. And again, all of those perimeter buffers will come through final development plans and final site plans. Next slide. We just kind of talked through adjacent properties and the natural environment. Brian went through in his site plan. We did submit an environmental review on the site, and staff recommended some specific things about nesting birds. And so all of those things that were provided, you saw them in your staff report. Those notes have been added to both the concept plan and the improvement plans so that we're following the protocol as outlined by natural resources as far as nesting birds as the property develops. As far as the evaluation sustainability system, setbacks adjacent to the river did not change. And so no additional sustainability evaluation was completed as part of this project. Next slide. So there's a few extra things that are specific to land use amendments and rezonings. I think the first one the basic thing for a land use amendment is that it really benefits this community as a whole, not just the landowner. So while this does benefit the owners of the property, the addition of the regional center, the mixed use corridor, and the diversity of the housing in this neighborhood and the provision for additional affordable housing really does benefit the community as a whole, in addition to the landowner. So I think that that intention, that when you're amending the comp plan, you're looking at all of us instead of just the small of us, is met through this application. Next slide. Preliminary subdivision plats have to meet the standard. And again, all of the criteria as outlined in the code, the preliminary plat as submitted meets those standards. It provides for integrated transportation network, connections to existing and future development, extension of utilities and infrastructure, and delineates lots that meet the standard. Next slide. Rezonings also have a little bit of special criteria, and I think the one that specifically applies to this application is that the rezoning presents the city with a unique opportunity. And again, the partnership between a major retailer and a landowner and the city of Longmont to create revenue, jobs, affordable housing, and diversity in the neighborhood meet that unique standard as far as that criteria grows. Next slide. We have an appropriate transportation network, and we've kind of gone through the multimodal plan and how this fits into the context. Again, additional details will come as the property is developed, but the connections are shown, the pedestrian access is shown, the bike access is shown, and we meet that standard. More detail as the property moves forward through the process. Next slide. These applications represent an opportunity to facilitate a unique public-private partnership to expand the city's tax base and install infrastructure to provide locations for a mix of development to expand the mix of uses in this part of the city. The applications as presented meet the proposed purpose and intent of the city's stated goals for development and the specific review criteria as outlined in the code. We respectfully request that you approve the preliminary plat as presented and forward the concept plan amendment, envision Longmont land use amendment, and rezoning to City Council with your recommendation for approval. We want to thank staff and the commission for your time and attention, and our team is here to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Brunk. So this is a public hearing item. I would like to move forward with opening up our public hearing section. So Susan, if we could get our slide on the screen for everybody. So now is the time, if you want to comment on this project, now is the time to call in. And to do that, dial 1-888-788-0099. When prompted, enter the meeting ID 837-8666-6906. And when we're ready to hear public comment, we will call on you to speak based on the last 3 digits of your phone number. Each speaker must state their name and address for the record and will be allowed 5 minutes to speak. Please remember to mute the live stream when you are called upon to speak. To do this, we need 5 minutes. So it's 8:38 right now. We'll be back at 8:43.
All right, Chair, I'm going to go ahead and drop the slide. Let's have a few seconds as the live stream catches up with us. All right, and it looks like the live stream is caught up. We do have two callers. I'll go ahead and ask the first caller to unmute. Caller 019. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Are you there?
I'm unmuted.
Great. Go ahead and state your name again and your address, and you have 5 minutes.
This is Lawrence Bashir. I live at 2 Western Sky Circle. We're very close to the development on the eastern edge of the Harvest Junction development.
And you may continue.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, I disagree with some of the information that Barb just provided there. I was given copy of a planned use development document, approved Irwin Thomas final PUD plan back in August of 2019, and it was approved apparently, back in 2016 and went through modifications several times. There's a whole string of notes and so forth on the side that shows that it was still under amendment and so forth through 2018, I think. And this did show the ponds and parks area that a lot of the residents mention whenever we call in. So this is something completely different, in terms of we're talking the use development for the new property. The other concern that a lot of the residents have over here is if you look at the where we have a couple of roundabouts actually on Martin as it comes in to the development, but most of the retail, right, we've got Lowe's, big development, big stores over there on the left, Michael's, Bed Bath and Beyond, large parking area. All that is on the north and west side of the standard of the Harvest Junction development. But if you look at where they're going to plan the new one, it's actually going to go much deeper. It's going to go much farther away from the highway. So that stays pretty much north of that second roundabout. Left-Hand Creek obviously kind of cuts in between there, so it stays north of Left-Hand Creek, all the stuff that's there right now, Lowe's and Ross, Dress for Less, so forth. But if you look at, the second roundabout then is farther south, and then of course this development goes even farther than the second roundabout. So my complaint was if look at the way Costco planned their setup there, was they're going to turn their building to face east essentially, and rather than turn it toward the highway like everybody else has. Ken Pratt, everyone's had, every development along this, doesn't matter if it's Walmart way, outside our county, or if it's Lowe's and all this stuff, all the big stores, face the road. But this is the only one that's going to go sideways. And then of course, because of that, then they put a lot of their parking on that north edge, and they slide their development farther south. That's going to put it a lot closer to the houses, and I think that's one of the points of contention here. I don't think anybody has a problem with some extra housing and so forth being built here. Obviously, we're in the middle of a construction zone right now, and we'll be that way probably for another year or two. But I think the real issue is like how big, when they talk about the mixed use and multifamily, how tall are we talking about building this? We can never get a number from anybody, whether it's going to be 3 stories, 4 stories. We know that there's some bigger developments, apartment complexes just down the road. If you continue on Ken Pratt as you go out east toward the Walmart, there's a couple of 3-story and 4-story apartment complexes being built out there, very large developments. And of course, then we have, the We Homes and the Water Market, at Harvest Junction right now. So our complaint, I guess, from the residents here a lot of times is that we already have a lot of apartment dwellings and so forth already in our area, and I'm not sure we need more, nor do we need it to be, continue to be surrounding by, our area, and of course these folks that live on Quail Road. I know they've had a lot of complaints for a lot of years apparently on earth movement. That whole development area where Costco's planning on coming in is all sunken land right now. It's way down below grade essentially. So there need to be a lot of earth movement to bring it up higher, and I think that was one of the concerns. If it were going to be a gravel mine, it'd be fine. They're already much lower in the ground, and then of course the berm would be easy to generate for them and to be able to hide the development and the noise behind the berm. So That's just the concerns from the neighborhood. I don't know who else has called in, but hopefully a few other residents will call and talk to you today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bashir. I really appreciate it. Susan, our next caller seems to have the last three digits of 290.
Chair, that's correct. Caller 290. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Are you there? Caller 290. Try hitting *6 on your phone. That will also unmute. If you're listening to the live stream, you'll probably hear this in about 20 or 30 seconds. Caller 290. There you are. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I think I hear myself, or it's, have you muted the live stream?
Yes, I did.
Okay, perfect. You may begin. If you could state your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm Stephanie Ryan. I live at 1263A Hummingbird Circle in Blue Vista, south of Quail Road. I just want to remind people that in the 2013 flood, Quicksilver Road was completely underwater. I was biking down it and it completely flooded and horses were being evacuated. Missouri Ave was flooded right almost to the rec center. We were on alert that if the Button Rock Dam had breached, 5 feet of water would have been in Blue Vista, south of Quail. A water engineer of a friend said that the mitigation for the flooding along the Frayne Greenway needed to be 3 miles wide. If not, there needed to be constructions that were 12, 14 feet tall through the center of town. This area that you're proposing is a floodplain. That's why the mining of the rocks, so the rocks are there because it's a floodplain. And so I just wanted to remind people of that, and that the more asphalt you put in and the more parking lots that you put in and the more housing that you put in, I think that the city needs to rethink the flooding that could occur again in the era of climate change, that we need to, that needs to be considered in this area. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ryan. Susan, I don't see anybody else listed, so we have no further callers, correct?
You are correct, Chair. You may continue.
Okay, we will close the public hearing on this, and we will go to discussion and questions amongst the commission. Commissioner Flake.
I guess this is for Brian, and I'm wondering, I don't have the language of the PUD in front of me, unfortunately, but there must be something that relates to the standards of how buildings need to front in terms of maintaining the character along that area. So I'm wondering, what are the criteria that would allow Costco to sort of tend to turn its back on the highway there, unlike, as was pointed out, all the other buildings are facing Penn Pratt.
So related to that, we've had conversations with Costco and their design team. And as part of, I think one of the earlier iterations of the architectural elevations that were shown at the neighborhood meeting, perhaps showed the primary customer entrance facing east, but through subsequent conversations that staff has had with the applicant and the Costco representatives and their architects, they have revised their plan to also include an element that looks at, that is an entrance element that faces towards Highway 119 as well, in addition to the entrance that faces to the east. So we'll have actually entrances both on the north side facing towards the Highway 119, and then also an entrance facing towards the east.
I'm wondering how many windows, how much of fenestration do you have in there on that north side? How much will it look like an entryway?
Well, I don't have the details with me, but we're reviewing that and making sure that it complies with our standards. Obviously, the site plan is an administrative application and it's not part of this review tonight, but we are reviewing that as part of the final subdivision plat and the site plan for Costco to make sure that it complies with city standards for building designs for non-residential and mixed-use developments.
Thank you.
So Brian, I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Flagg's question, but slightly differently. Why is the building rotated 90 degrees so its longitudinal axis is north-south, whereas along Ken Pratt, all of the large box stores, the longitudinal axis is east-west? What's the reasoning? I mean, okay, so they're putting an entrance on the north side, but that is the short side of the building. Why is the building, the majority of its length, going north-south? To Mr. Bashir's point, if that weren't the case, then less of the building would be close to the houses that are on the east side of the residences to the west. So what's the rationale to have rotated the building 90 degrees?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I'd have to defer perhaps to, Representative. I don't know if Deanna's available to talk about that in terms of the orientation of the building.
Well, I could add some comments.
Okay, yes, please.
Okay. First of all, good evening, Mr. Chair and City Council members. Again, my name is Diana Salazar. I reside my address is 9 Corporate Park in Irvine, California. A couple of things in relation to the building orientation that I think is worth pointing out. First of all, the back of the building, it's always the quietest side of the building. We have several residential developments, and one of the things that we look for is putting the quiet side of the building against residential. You basically have no noise on the back side of the building. Specifically on this building, we made sure that the truck route for our receiving trucks do not circulate behind the building. So you're basically going to have a very quiet side against residential. There's also going to be at least 200 feet of separation between the building wall and the first residential building to the west. I'm not sure on the other projects that were point out in terms of the area. Obviously, the area they have. If we were to turn this building around, we would practically take a lot of the development that the developer is trying to provide as part of the large development. I'm not quite sure even that the project will be even feasible for him. From a financial standpoint, if we were to take that much land, there's a minimum amount of parking that we require to operate. And I also think the gas station in relationship to the building is probably at the right location. So there were several things that we had to take into consideration as well in terms of the general layout and how we fit in with the rest of the development to orient it the way we did.
Thank you, Ms. Salazar. Appreciate that. And I'm not sure if this is going to be a question for you or Brian or maybe our traffic engineer, but since you did mention the back of the building being the quietest and that the trucks are delivering, on the other side, which I appreciate you explaining. But I am wondering how delivery trucks, large semis, are to get through that first roundabout, and how are they supposed to win their way through the parking lot and to the delivery doors? Maybe it's Ms. Brunk will explain that, or somebody can help me understand better how the delivery trucks actually make it in and out, especially past that first roundabout.
Explain, or should I?
Big picture. The roundabout is designed for trucks. Everybody knew there were going to be trucks there. The roundabout is designed for trucks. So basically, they come off of 119 to the gas station. They circulate through the gas station. Then they go back out through the right out along the highway. So those cars circulate through the roundabout along the kind of northern side of the Costco property, and then circle back out and go out the right out. Here we go. Thank you. So again, the red line is how the trucks work for the gas station deliveries. The blue line is how the trucks work for the warehouse deliveries. So they go through the roundabout, and then they enter the deliveries for the warehouse enter through a southern access into the property. And again, the goal was to keep all of that delivery traffic away from this residential development to this side. So it really was thoughtful. And again, this is a concept that is not the final site plan, but it does show the intent and the idea. That is still the circulation pattern. So.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brunk. That answered my question. Other questions from the commission? Commissioner Poland.
Brian, Mr. Vasir had a comment about the development and what sounded like he was indicating that his indication is that there would be commercial going further south than where things currently are. When I look at this plan, the bottom half to 2/3 is multifamily neighborhood and mixed neighborhood. I'm wondering if you can go over what is basically a multifamily neighborhood and what a mixed neighborhood, so that we can anticipate what's going to go into that bottom half.
Sure, Commissioner Poland. So as you mentioned, there's 2 lots that are just south of the lot 1 on the preliminary plat that lot 1 is for the Costco warehouse. And so the 2 lots immediately to the south of that are proposed to be zoned residential multifamily. And so that 16 acres roughly of multifamily neighborhood, could be a combination of a single family attached housing. So for example, it could be townhomes, could be condominiums, could be apartments. Any of those are a potential option under that particular zoning. And then to the south of Bountiful, between Bountiful and Quail, is an area that's proposed to be zoned residential mixed neighborhood. And so residential mixed neighborhood has a pretty flexible density range, anywhere from 6 to 18 units per acre. So that could be a mix of single family detached. It could be single family attached, could be some smaller apartments potentially as well. So the residential, just for example, in terms of the question about height compatibility, the residential mixed neighborhood zoning, which is the southern portion between Bountiful and Quail, has a height limit that's the same as what's allowed under the residential single family zoning to the west, which is 35 feet maximum. Now, the multifamily zoning also allows for additional building height for potential multifamily apartment projects. And as I mentioned in the presentation and as noted in the communication, the westerly of those two multifamily neighborhood lots of that area south of Costco is the parcel that the city will be acquiring. It's 9 acres in size. We're still a ways off from coming up with a design for that. That'll probably, I don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but and we don't know exactly yet what type of housing will occur on that city-owned property in terms of whether that will be for sale townhomes or rentals. We just haven't decided that yet.
One quick, so in the mixed neighborhood, is there any chance for retail or is that just all residential?
So as the commission may recall, when we did the code update in 2018, and obviously we incorporated a lot of mixed use districts, but we also with the update, and it's related to implementation of the Envision Longmont comprehensive plan as well. So as part of that update, the residential mixed neighborhood and residential multifamily zoning districts do have allowances, and this is to encourage more walkability and incorporation of a mix of uses in neighborhoods. But there is the ability to propose smaller scale commercial uses that are intended to be more walkable in those residential zoning districts. Now, from the standpoint of process, if somebody wanted to propose a small commercial building, for example, in that residential mixed neighborhood area, it would have to go through a conditional use review. And so that would have to be reviewed and approved for compatibility and obviously approved by Planning and Zoning Commission, subject to appeal to City Council.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Sure.
Commissioner Height?
Thanks. There's a lot of big picture items here that I think it'll take a while to get our heads and hands wrapped around. Comp plan review, rezoning, and then concept plan with a preliminary subdivision plat. I think I'm following them, but I also got lost in the weeds. So I have a couple of weed questions to talk about. And that was just a bad pun. Brian, in your materials, you raised the issue that the school district has looked at the potential development and sees that there's probably no impact right now. Though you note that the mining of the property is going to extend the potential residential development out 5 years. My question is, at building permit, do we relook, or does the city relook at school capacity and are exactments made at that point in time? Or is this the one and only time when we look at whether or not subdivision is going to overburden our school system?
So Commissioner Height, there's multiple opportunities for referral to the school district, and actually by our code and IGA that we have with the school district for any development application that goes through a site plan review or subdivision review. We refer those applications to the school district to update their assessment and analysis regarding school capacity compliance. And so any site plan associated with this initial preliminary subdivision plat that has a residential component would be referred to the school district for comment. Those future preliminary subdivision plats and final subdivision plats on the east side of Harvest Moon Drive, that will be submitted after mining and reclamation. Yeah, down the road, obviously that's maybe 10 years down the road or more. Those will also be referred to the school district for comment and assessment in terms of compliance with the school capacity benchmark.
Okay, but then to be clear, on the 70 acres on the east side that we're looking at tonight, the residential components of the two southern lots, so to speak, the school district is signing off on those, knowing, well, we're anticipating this will be built within 5 years because there's no mining going on here. Is that correct? Ms. Clark,
Yes.
is that correct?
That's accurate, Commissioner Height. You know, I know their assessment took into consideration all of the residential. And as you'll note in most of the student generation is associated with the single family zoning area that's going to be mined over the next 10 plus years. And so obviously, whenever that subdivision application comes in for that area after the mining and reclamation has occurred, the school district will need to reassess that. Before, in the interim, while the for the residential multifamily and the residential mixed neighborhood, that's part of the preliminary subdivision plat, the school district did not have a concern regarding school capacity on that portion.
Okay, appreciate that. Next question is with respect to the environmental report. Is it Lieutenant? Is it Captain Goldman? I apologize that I don't know your full title.
It's Captain Goldman.
Captain Goldman. There's a 2015 report, which is some 7 years old, that identified at least possibly one area of environmental concern. And I can't fathom in my mind exactly where this small engine repair shop is. But it's a 7-year-old report. Captain Goldman, are you satisfied that we don't need something more current?
And Costco did perform their own on their particular spot. We did ask them to do that before they moved dirt, just because we weren't sure. And the length, there was nothing in the 15 report that would have warranted it. We did request that, and Costco and the applicant did comply. So that's a good question, Commissioner. Nothing else. We've had no recent incidents since that 2015 report came out, or notices of spills from any other incident, so to speak. So no hazardous material calls, no releases, and no spills of note since that 15 ESA came out. But Costco did, at our request, provide another environmental site assessment for their site specifically before they moved dirt.
The Costco ESA was only for the Costco property?
Correct.
Okay. And do you know where this small engine repair shop noted in the 2015 report, where is that? Is that on the Costco site?
It is not. It's on the, if I'm right, it's on the north side. Is that right, Barb? It's over. I'll let Barb address some of that. It's not there now.
Well, that site was given a clean bill of health by the phase. We did a phase 1 and a phase 2 on it, actually. And so Michelle asked us to go through and list the things. It talked about some things in the general neighborhood that were of note as part of the environmental assessment, but there was nothing on this property that caused concern as part of that review. So we looked at it again. The staff reviewed it again to make sure that it was still relevant. And then we also looked at Costco. So Costco site is absolutely clean. It's been farmed. The only thing that's out there is the little tiny pump house for the ditch. So, and existing utilities. The rest of that stuff, the only kind of hair on this site ever was at the sugar mill. And the portion of the site that is included in the gravel mining was reviewed at that time. So all of the ground south of the river was given a clean bill of health. Does that make sense?
It does. Okay, then I think I'm going to switch gears and talk back to the commissioners. The bigger issues I think that we need to look at, amending the comp plan. This is a re-review of kind of what we did before with, Envision Longmont. The rezoning, I'm looking forward to having more discussion and hearing from more of my my colleagues here on what their thoughts are on these other big issues. Thanks.
I have a question that I would like to touch on, and I think it's going to be Tyler Stamey will answer this for me because it's about the traffic report, traffic study. Tyler, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've learned over the years that the city of Longmont's traffic standard is that intersections operate at level of service level D or better. That's our standard. But when I was looking through the traffic study, it looks like they did a short-term study and a long-term view. And in the long-term view, 2039, some intersections that are studied hit level E. So why is it that Brian's reporting to us that the city staff is okay with this? If our standard is level D, if I'm correct about that, and by 2039, this project would hit level E on some intersections, how do you explain that? How do you reconcile that together?
Sure, Nick, great question. And you're correct. Our current benchmark level service is D or better. And then D for any individual movements that are 5% of the entering volume. But, when we look at the long-term projections, I'd say, 2039, a lot's happening in transportation right now. And I think we're seeing a major shift in transportation and how transportation works right now. And I think that projections, right now, projections are best estimates. We base that on current growth rates, current planned known developments based on any existing modeling we have. What do we think is going to happen in Longmont? Where are the houses? Where are the jobs going to go? And that also comes from a regional model with Dr. Cog. So it's not looking at just Longmont in a vacuum. We're also looking at what's happening east of Longmont, what's happening west of Longmont and north, and doing our best guess at putting all that together. Say it's 100% perfect and we can project within perfect accuracy that we know exactly what those numbers are going to be in 2039. I don't think we're quite there. It's a planning tool at this point. I think, for the short term, we're showing that or anticipate that the system will work with the improvements proposed. And I think that further evaluation as future phases of the development come in, those projections may change and we may need to adjust in the future with additional development in the future. But for the short term, the stuff that we know or we think we know is coming in, we've got a good level of comfort with what the results are showing us in terms of level of service at the intersections with the improvements proposed.
Okay, and yeah, thank you for that. Just to clarify for everybody, the report did show that in the short term, none of the intersections go lower than level D. So, that would be okay by our standard. I have another big picture question, and maybe it's from Ms. Brunk. Thank you, Tyler. Seems to me that I'm a little confused as to, in the long run, you've got the phases you showed us, and the mining results in ponds, and people seem to have in the neighborhood feedback we got, people were like, it's going to stay ponds. We're going to have ponds next to our houses. But then you show a phase 3, which is reclamation, and the ponds go away, and then it's turned into a housing development. How do you achieve the ponds going away? And to Ms. Ryan's comments when she called in about the flooding, which seems to be more prevalent on that east end of the overall property. Now you've got ponds from mining and flooding to deal with. So how do you do all that? How do you deal with all that?
It's complicated, big picture. The ponds don't go away. The ponds will be integrated into the land development, but they will be on private property and function as part of the integrated open space network as part of the land development. So I think the conversation was, we're going to have a public park there. It has never been anticipated to do that. You'll see the difference between the mining and reclamation. Portions of the mining are backfilled, so the ponds get smaller. The floodplain is an ever-moving target, as we all know, and prior to any development, the floodplain does not impact the Costco property. prior to any development on anything that's in the floodplain, we'd have to go through a floodplain development permit, a full analysis, and make sure that anything we did would not have a negative impact on the floodplain on our site and on the adjacent property. So that, I know it sounds like I'm pushing it down the road because I am, but again, ponds are integrated. I mean, think of lakefront public gathering spaces in a residential community, and those ponds will be integrated into the overall drainage improvements and low impact development standards. So as we put the drainage through the site, it'll come through the middle of that site and end up through those ponds and then go back to the river. So it could be part of the water quality control system. It could also provide irrigation waters for some kind of open space thing. So lots of sustainability opportunities with those reclaimed ponds. They're not going away. They just have to get shaped and integrated into the long-term land use. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes. It looks like it was more of a misunderstanding on my part than anybody else's. So thank you for that explanation. Commissioner Flake.
Along those same lines, following up on Michael's question, what kind of a slope are you dealing with across the property?
Flat as a pancake.
Okay, so right now you have ponds in some areas. Does that then require that as you develop specific areas, there will have to be some fill brought in to raise the land up so that you can create dry areas on which to build structures? How will that work with a flat of a pancake and you have to drain off the land?
Again, it's complicated. So average slope is 5% across the property. So it does drain. I mean, it's been irrigated, you know, it's been flood irrigated for years. So it does drain. There will be some fill required as part of the development on the Costco site, but the dirt that we pull out of the detention pond will be used to fill the site. So we're not going to be importing fill to do that. In the future, as that residential subdivision to the east is developed, it is likely that there could be fill. But as part of the gift of a gravel mining application is they're moving dirt around. So it is possible that as we go forward with the mining and reclamation, we could work with the city on a floodplain development permit and create that higher ground as part of the reclamation of the site. So yes, it will have to come out of the floodplain.
But will there be one overall drainage kind of channel throughout the property that you will then move? I don't know which site it drains to. Does it drain from northwest to southeast?
The low point is at the north. As the site is developed, there's actually a significant drainage improvement, existing improvement along the north side of the property that's carrying some drainage from Harvest Junction, and that we will also put some drainage in there. The way it's designed so that the detention that's working now for the preliminary plat may be relocated at the time the rest of that site is developed. But again, it can drain. It can be very interesting because the ability to put a really nice channel through the middle of that residential development to get the water back to the river will have both open space qualities, wildlife corridor properties, water quality properties. So, but it's not designed yet. So that piece of it will come when the preliminary plat comes through on the single family residential, and we'll be back in front of you to talk about it.
So just one more question.
Sure.
So you're not going to design that channel or whatever you're going to do all at the same time? You're going to build it in pieces?
The master drainage plan for the subdivision has been completed to accommodate the improvements on the preliminary plat as presented. So that drainage is all accounted for. Detention is accounted for. Water quality is accounted for. All those things are accounted for. And one of you engineers hit me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. As the rest of the property develops, the drainage plan will be amended to accommodate the remainder of the property. But the property does fall from west to east at about 5%, and the low point is in the corner. So whatever happens in the future, that's the way the drainage will leave the site.
Okay, thank you.
Not a very technical question, but I'm a landscape architect.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Thanks, Chairman. Hey, Brian, I wonder if I could ask you a couple questions around some public feedback. Hey there. So I think we've buttoned it up, but I wonder if you could just help me address Mr. Bashir's concern. He sure seemed confident that he was looking at, I think he said an approved POD with ponds and parks. And we're saying that's not the case. Would you mind just helping clarify, or can you shed any light as to why there's been some confusion about what looked like was going to be ponds and parks, and now we're looking at a big old development?
If you go back to my PowerPoint presentation, you can have a picture, Brian.
Yeah, Susan, can you put that back up, please? So, what I can say is, when the property was annexed in 2018, there was several components to that application at the time. Obviously, there was annexation. There was also an amendment to the Envision Longmont plan. There was also a concept plan as part of the annexation, which is required. And then there was also, which the commission reviewed at that time, concurrent with the annexation, there was also a PUD plan that was for the mining plan for the site. And so the one component of the mining plan, and Barb, feel free to jump in whenever you want, the mining plan, or the PUD plan that showed the mining, obviously it showed the mining cells, it showed the reclamation plan, and it referenced in some of the notes, future development on the property. It obviously, that was just one part of the picture, was this mining plan. The other component to that was the Envision Longmont comprehensive plan amendment, and then also the concept plan that was approved as part of the annexation, which both reflected future land uses for the property long-term, which obviously those weren't necessarily reflected on the mining and reclamation plan, but they were also approved as part of the annexation and concept plan at the same time.
If you go through to slide 8 of my presentation, it shows the compare.
Keep going. I'm on 2 of 4. I can't tell which slide I'm on.
Oh, okay. You're on slide. Keep going. Next. No, up. Sorry, back up. Keep going back.
We'll get there eventually.
Back. There. Back again. Back again. Back again. Keep going. Keep going. Next. Keep going. It's almost its very beginning. There it is. This is it. Okay. So this is a good example of the before and after. So the initial concept plan, which is in the public record, and the FDP showed the mining as phase 1, showed the reclamation as phase 2, and showed development of the property as phase 3. So I think the same question that Chairman Chernak had about how do you integrate ponds into a land development is pretty clear. The other thing that was very clear in the notes as we went through this process was, depending on what happened on the site, as you see the difference between the mining and the reclamation, that's because there's backfill. And so what happens is, as the property is mined, sometimes there's more dirt and sometimes there's less dirt. So the ponds can get smaller and the ponds can get bigger and the ponds can get reconfigured. And that is always contemplated and was actually accounted for in those notes that Brian was talking about. So I think if what happened is people saw this phase 2 map and didn't understand that at some point it would be developed, and it may or may not include filling back in of some of those ponds. And I think therein lies the confusion. Because we never did like a real site plan that showed where the buildings were going to be relative to the ponds in the future. We wanted to make sure that the land use covered the entire site so that if the ponds are reconfigured, we would have the ability to develop consistent with the land use within the code and the zoning at the time. Does that help?
Yeah, Ms. Bronk, I think that helps a lot. Thank you for clarifying that. You know, I think it may be obvious to yourself and others who have been working on this for a long time, but as a concerned neighbor who's quickly looking at a map, trying to interpret it and sees blue pond looking, you know, spaces on a map, and oh, you know, maybe they can feel relieved, but it's really a multi-phased approach, and you know, there hasn't been any trickery going on here. It's just being able to recognize step 1, step 2, and step 3. So thank you for that clarification. Brian, I wonder if I can get you back on again. Another, you know, whenever folks are, you know, living in their apartments or homes and really digging the views, it's easy to become frustrated with the proposal and seeing proposals of more apartments or higher buildings and, you know, these regional centers as well. But I wonder if you could just share, what is the perspective from the city on placing higher density housing near regional centers? Is that generally desirable and something that we shoot for when we're kind of building out our city, or do we frown upon that?
I mean, I think Commissioner Goldberg, I mean, there's a couple of perspectives. Obviously, one is in terms of land use, we're trying to transition from more intensive land uses to less intensive land uses. And so obviously the highest intensive land use on this proposed site is the regional commercial center. And then probably next in level of intensity is the residential multifamily, although there will be a future mixed-use corridor parcel after the mining is completed on the east side of Harvest Moon Drive, just south of Highway 119. But again, from a kind of a transition of development intensity, and then also having multifamily housing that's nearby areas where people can shop and access other services. Yeah, I mean, I think that's consistent with the Envision Longmont plan. I think it's consistent with some of the goals and strategies regarding transition of zonings between more intensive and less intensive zoning.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think that's just important to recognize. There's that intention of going from highest density or busiest retail centers and regional centers, and then kind of working your way back, eventually getting towards those single family homes. Maybe on that same topic, can you just speak, you don't have to cite percentages or numbers, but how are we looking, you know, in Longmont as far as inventory of affordable housing or apartments, and kind of this, what's available now for folks who are trying to live in Longmont? Would this kind of mixed density affordable units be desirable, or do we already have a bunch of those?
I would certainly say we do not have a bunch. Obviously, it's a goal, and obviously, as you've probably, a lot of you have gotten your recent property assessment valuation in the mail. Yeah. Obviously, that valuation has gone up substantially over the last couple of years. And affordability continues to be an ongoing issue and a priority for City Council. I will say that, you know, I help coordinate our pre-application meetings. And so we have seen quite a few multifamily projects come through the pipeline and are going through the pre-submittal kind of planning stages. But seems to be that there's still a significant demand for multifamily housing, both for sale and rental. And in particular, I think based on some conversations with our housing staff, I think there's also obviously a demand for affordable for sale housing in particular. And, you know, who knows on that 9-acre parcel that the city will be acquiring as part of this project, that may be an opportunity to look at for some for sale affordable housing on that location. I don't know if that completely answers your question, Commissioner Goldberg.
Yeah, I think it does. You know, Brian, I think every time Aaron Fosdig joins us in a commission meeting, we learn about the limited opportunities for housing in our town. I think even on a recent commission, some communications, we discussed how inventory is less than 10%, maybe even less than 5%, and it's much desirable to have a higher rate of vacant or available properties or available units, and we just don't have them. So I think this project might be filling some of those needs. And then I guess my last question, Brian, speaks to Ms. Ryan's concern around flooding. I guess my question to you is, do we feel comfortable with Barb pushing this down the line? She admitted to having some of the answers now, but not, she can't really answer all the questions for us around flooding as we look into the future. Why are you and the rest of the team comfortable moving forward and not feeling like we're putting everyone at risk for flooding?
Well, Commissioner Goldberg, it'd be pretty scary if I responded to your question. So I may just defer, see if either Chris or Jim might be able to get on the. Thanks, Chris.
Sure, no problem,
Hey,
Brian.
Chris, thanks for joining. I wonder if you could just provide a little comfort or insight as to how are we managing potential flooding down the line? What are we doing to mitigate any flooding, especially given how our city has been impacted by flooding in the past?
Certainly, Commissioner Goldberg and Chairman Chernak. As you're probably aware, there's a much larger CIP project going on right now, which is the Resilient St. Vrain project. And in association with that, after the 2013 floods, with the Colorado Water Conservation Board, our counties and the state are updating all of the FEMA firm maps. They redid the hydrology. So we have updated information and modeling that's going through the FEMA process at the moment. And so those updated maps, the City Council has adopted as best available information. And the 2019 preliminary, I think, is the latest. And that's showing that even without any of our CIP improvements, that water is backing up at the bridge at Pratt Boulevard. It's flooding that area to the north. As it comes across, that hits another area at 119th Street. There's another bridge which backs it up. And so the modeling so far, based upon what we have, shows that the Costco area and the area that we're developing is not impacted by the floodplain, other than a small portion that the preliminary firms are showing overtops 119 at the drive intersection of the main street that's coming north-south from Quail up to 119th Street. That the city looked at in greater depth, and we actually filed an appeal with FEMA for that. The modeling that we were looking at showed that it does not overtop the highway at that location. And that appeal has gone through the FEMA review process. We've received confirmation that yes, the information we've provided does appear to be correct, and we expect approval of that appeal in the coming months. And so that will be reflected on the updated firms that will be adopted in the next year or year and a half. So we are fairly confident with the modeling that's been done that this property is out of the floodplain. It does not have an impact on flooding in this area. And as I think Barb correctly pointed out, that there is flooding to the east on the current farm property, but that will need to be addressed. It will need to be taken out of the floodplain before any residential development can happen out there.
Thanks, Chris. That was really helpful. Appreciate it. No more questions for me. Thanks, Trainer.
Okay. I've been thinking about Commissioner Height's kind of big question of, okay, we've got 4 things in front of us. a comp plan amendment, rezoning, a concept plan amendment, and a preliminary subdivision plat. And if I'm correct, Brian, we are the deciding body only on the preliminary subdivision plat. We are recommending on all the other three.
That is correct.
Okay. Brian, quick question for you. I mean, these all came to us together, I assume, for a reason. What happens if you take one of these pieces out and I mean, if you were to approve 3 but not 4, or approve 2 but not all 4, is this an all or nothing sort of thing that we're looking at?
I would say pretty much yes. Yes. Okay. I mean, I think one without the others, or 3 without, the other one, it creates a problem in terms of overall design and land use and zoning for the overall site development.
Okay. Commissioner Height?
Figured out how to raise my hand electronically. Following up on this discussion, and looking at the big picture, Ms. Brunk, I'm going to put it right back to you. You have cited for an envisioned Longmont land use revision under 1502-060B3. It has to be in the best interest of the city. Tell us why this is.
Absolutely. So a couple of things. Large commercial retailer brings significant revenue to the community and jobs. Affordable housing, which is a serious issue, we really need to have more of. The comp plan amendment provides additional opportunities for affordable housing. The comp plan amendment also moves the gravel mining away from the adjacent neighborhood. So again, in the big picture of the community, it allows a portion of the property that is inside the city and can be served by utilities in an efficient manner to be developed before the property is mined and reclaimed. So in the context of compact urban form and utilization of existing infrastructure and building on what we have, all of these things in that amendment serve to move that forward. Make sense?
I like your answer. The next issue I think I can get comfortable with myself, but I'm going to read out what the standard is for. So preliminary plat under 1502-060E has to be integrated, has to not leave undevelopable lots, and it has to have rational phasing. I think I can see that in these plans. The last issue, however, though, with respect to rezoning, 1502-060F5, you have to meet one of 3 standards. A, consistent with the rezoning, is consistent with events, trends, or facts occurring after adoption of the original zoning. Or B, and you have to demonstrate one of these 3. Or B, the rezoning corrects a technical error. I don't think we're there. Or C, the rezoning presents the city with a unique opportunity or an appropriate site at an appropriate location for a particular type of land use or development that will help the city achieve a balance of land use tax base or housing types. Which one do we meet? Which one do you think is triggered here with this rezoning?
I believe it's C. This is an absolutely unique opportunity to do those things as outlined in the code.
Okay.
And I'll let Brian chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's consistent with the staff analysis as well, and in the communication is that the justification C is the appropriate justification for this rezoning.
Okay. Brian, in that regard, so the concept plan amendment, what standards am I looking at there? Are we looking at?
So the concept plan amendment, it falls back to the review criteria for all application types.
And all three of these also have to fit into that too.
That is correct. All four applications fit under that as well.
Okay. I appreciate Ms. Brunke running through that analysis with me. That's helpful. I'm done.
Commissioner Honoran.
Thank you. When I look at the comp plan, rezoning, and the subdivision, I think there's a hierarchy there. I'm looking at the page that compares the existing land use proposed plan. In terms of what is already approved for the land uses, mixed use employment, mixed neighborhood, single family neighborhood, we're adding the regional center and multi-family neighborhood. That is the question in front of us, not the whole plan, not the whole land use. Are we okay with adding regional center and multi-family neighborhood? And part of that multi-family neighborhood piece is owned by the city and will be used for affordable housing. That's given. So the big question in front of us, is this compatible with the comprehensive plan? If the answer yes, it automatically tells us that rezoning is okay and we should look at the subdivision plan. I agree with the evaluation so far that subdivision plan is pretty sensitive already. The orientation, the location of the big box, and the way the transition is happening from the big box to the neighborhood, it's pretty sensitive. So all of a sudden, I feel a little bit relaxed about the question in front of us. It's not a big question, actually. It is already mixed use employment, mixed use neighborhood, and single family is already in front of us, and it's already approved. The big question is, do we want Costco here? That is the regional center. It's something bigger than your typical mixed use employment. So with that, the explanation I hear from Barb makes me much happier, because it's not my responsibility to all over accept this package, but just one simple question, that is, do we want a regional center here? And comes with, there's a private-public partnership component of this that also justifies and makes me more comfortable about saying okay to this proposal. All three of the levels. That is to say, if we say yes to regional center, then it's kind of hierarchically we're saying yes to the others as well. But the subdivision plan itself is a different component, and the transition and the locationing and the servicing, I think it's done pretty successfully, and I'm satisfied with the explanation. Thanks.
Commissioner Poland.
So Barb and Brian, is the opportunity really the fact that Costco came and wanted to put their warehouse here, and that is what basically caused the need for the rezoning and the consent plan and the changes, is basically because of Costco being coming forward and saying we would like to put a warehouse here?
I think it's a little more complicated than that. Again, if there was no Costco, we wouldn't be here. But Costco was going to go somewhere else in Longmont, and it didn't work out. And so our city worked together with Costco to find an appropriate location for them to stay inside our city limits so we would keep the tax revenue. And this site was the site. And so in order to do that, we have to do all these land use applications to make it work. So yes, that is the heart of it.
Yep,
okay.
I agree.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Man, I think that's the right place for a Costco. When I look at that retail district and entering into Harvest Junction off of 119, I just think it just fits. And if that's why we're here and that's what triggered this discussion today, I think I'm okay with it. As I look at our review criteria, as it relates to the comprehensive plan, land use amendments, yeah, the addition of mixed use, the affordable housing opportunity, the multifamily neighborhood, the increase in housing diversity in our city, it makes a ton of sense, and I see that as favorable and in line with Envision Longmont. If I scroll down to the preliminary subdivision plat, it will not limit the ability to integrate into the surrounding land. The subdivision will not create lots that are undevelopable, and there's a clear phasing process here that admittedly took me a few times to fully grasp, but there's a logical phasing approach here. As it relates to rezoning, I think option C, the rezoning, presents the city with a unique opportunity. And in here is the balance of land use, tax base, and housing types. And I just feel like we spent the better part of an hour talking as a commission very recently about the lack of housing opportunities in our city, certainly affordable housing opportunities. And I just think, again, this is checking the boxes. So I guess, I would encourage the rest of the commission and look forward to hearing additional feedback from the commission. But all in all, I think this is checking the boxes, and I'm not sure it's that big of a burden to lift this evening.
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Oneron, Poland, and Goldberg, but I'm only like 92.6% there yet. I have another question for Brian. So can you explain again to me what our concept is with mixed use corridor? Because part of what I believe it's a change, is that we're putting mixed use corridor up against Ken Pratt Boulevard on the north end of this plan.
Yeah, so, the mixed use corridor zoning will obviously that area is not being rezoned. That's part of the comprehensive plan amendment at this time, because that area is going to be mined. So we need to keep the PUD zoning on that portion until after it's mined, and then it could come back in for a rezoning consistent with the comprehensive plan. So the amendment, obviously the current comprehensive plan shows mixed use employment in that area east of where Harvest Moon Drive would be. And so the proposed change would allow a little bit more flexibility in terms of different types of commercial, office, and employment uses in that mixed use corridor zoning district. But I think it's generally consistent with the intent of what we're trying to achieve along the Highway 119 frontage.
Okay, thanks, Brian. And so would mixed use corridor potentially also include like live work spaces? I seem to remember that it does.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty flexible. It also, it could allow some multifamily as a kind of a secondary use as part of that. Live work is a potential as well. So yeah, it's fairly flexible. Obviously, the intent and the primary area that we have currently with that zoning is the Main Street corridor, and then the corridor along Highway 119 or Ken Pratt Boulevard as you head west of Main Street, where most of the mixed use corridor zoning is. So having it along the Highway 119 frontage is not inconsistent with those other areas.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Poland.
Yeah, I do have one question concerning the concept plan amendment. And that's, I'm going to read here from the last part of it. And reconfigure the mining and reclamation on the property to exclude the western 70 acres from the mining area, which is good. And I understand that. But it says then, and to reduce the mining setback on two of the cells located south of Highway 119 from 200 feet to 100 feet. Can you explain where that reduction is and why it has to be reduced from 200 to 100 feet?
Susan, could you put back up the mining slide, please?
Give me just a minute.
Yeah. And I'll show you on the map. so you'll see it. I mean, in the up.
Go to the beginning.
Yeah, actually this shows next, that'll show it. This one will show it. So you can see that if you run along the Highway 119 frontage along the north edge of that those mining cells, see how there's two that are a little closer to the highway and one that stays further away. So that the setback, the 200-foot setback as you get closer to the river has been retained. The reduction is along the two cells to the westernmost cells of the mining. And the reason we did that was to help get back a little of the material that was lost to the gravel miner. We were trying to recover because as part of this, the resource we had to kind of work to help the operator not lose the resource that we were taking out from under the Costco. So that setback was intended to help bring back some of that gravel into their resource. Does that make sense? But it has to be approved by CDOT and the DRMS before we can change it.
Okay, and so basically when I'm looking at this, if I go over to the eastern side, I see where it's a little bit wider.
That's the 200 feet. Yep.
Right. If the original plan basically had that buffer, basically chopping off a little bit of the top half of those two westernmost pieces.
Right. The 200-foot setback was all the way along that edge between the highway and the mining. So just the two western pieces we've requested to bring the setback closer to the highway.
Okay. And Brian, was that an arbitrary setback or is that a setback from our code?
No, I think that was as part of this probably relates back to the original mining approval through Boulder County, that setback was established. And obviously, I think remind me again, Barb, when the mining plan was approved by Boulder County, I don't think that the Highway 119 extension even existed at that time. And so when the highway was extended east of Main Street, that we had to kind of work with CDOT and the state in terms of what was an appropriate setback from those highway improvements, just to make sure that the mining would not adversely impact the roadway improvements and any utilities along that corridor. Is that correct, Barb?
The 200 feet did come from the Boulder County approval, and it was based on the fact that the highway wasn't designed yet. So we set it up to be a 200-foot setback. As you go through the technical review at the Colorado Division of Mining, Reclamation, and Safety, they make you do what's called a slope stability analysis. And so before we could change that the 200-foot setback is in the permit at the state. So before we could change that, we would have to go back and perform that. The operator would have to go back and perform that setback analysis to make sure that moving it closer doesn't jeopardize the integrity of any of the utilities out there or any of the highways. And it's generally, rule of thumb is it's twice the depth of the resource. So we believe that 100 feet will work, but the technical review for that will come through the Division of Minerals and Geology. So we put it in as a placeholder here, so nobody would be surprised later if the setback changed.
Okay, so basically you're just asking us for approval, but then you have to go to the state for further approval.
That's correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I guess as we kind of round the last turn here in the discussion, I'm inclined to just look back at while this evening we only had Lawrence Bashir and Stephanie Ryan tune in, there were 44 participants in the neighborhood virtual meeting back in December of 2020. And I just want to, kind of make sure or just recognize that we as the commission have reviewed many of the concerns raised at that meeting. Heights, the orientation of Costco, certainly any concerns around traffic, mining, phasing, and impact to the neighborhood. And I just want to make sure everyone who's tuned in and that will be impacted by this project recognizes that we took their concerns into consideration address them and and have looked for solutions and found justification if we go that way. But given the fact that the project before us has met the review criteria, given the fact that the comp plan land use amendment met the review criteria, for all the reasons that we've discussed a few times already, given the fact that the preliminary subdivision plat met the review criteria and the rezoning component met the criteria, in our discussion here, I'm inclined to make a motion, and I think that would read, I'm going to read because there's a couple pieces to this. So recommend conditionally approve the Irwin Thomas preliminary subdivision plat and recommend approval of the Irwin Thomas comprehensive plan land use amendment, rezoning, concept plan amendment, and preliminary subdivision plat as reflected in PZR 2021-5B.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve PZR 2021-5B, and just to clarify, reading further down about the condition on that is that approval is subject to City Council approval. And the reason for that is because we're only the deciding body on one of these four things. City Council must approve the other three. If they failed to do so, then it negates our PZR. Is that right, Brian?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. So Commissioner Poland.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so motion to approve PZR 2021-5B is seconded by Commissioner Poland. Is there any further discussion? Okay, let's take a vote. Commissioner Poland.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Aye.
Commissioner Teta.
Aye.
Commissioner Flake.
Aye.
Commissioner Oneron.
Aye.
Commissioner Haight.
In favor.
And I am also in favor. So that passes unanimously 7-0. This item will now be forwarded to the Longmont City Council for action. If you're unfamiliar with council procedures and intend to appear before council, please contact the Planning Division for further information at 303-651-8330. Ms. Brunk, thank you very much for stepping us through a lot of complex business tonight and explaining it very well to us. It makes our job easier. Thank you. Thank you for bringing all of your team with you. Brian, thanks for inviting all of the city staff who also were here to answer all of our questions. Appreciate that very much as well. We still have some more business to cover. So item 7 on our agenda is our final call for the public invited to be heard. If you want to speak about something that was not on tonight's agenda, please call 1-888-788-0099. When prompted, enter the meeting ID 837-8666-6906. When we're ready to hear your public comment, we will call on you to speak based on the last 3 digits of your phone number. Each speaker must state their name and address for the record and will be allowed 5 minutes to speak. Please remember to mute the live stream when you are called upon to speak. To do this, we need 5 minutes. It's 10:01, so we'll come back at 10:06.
Hello?
All right, Chair, I'm going to go ahead and drop the slide. We'll let our live stream get caught up. And we do have one caller.
Okay.
Give me just a second. Let's see the slide clear. All right, looks like we're back. And caller 019, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Caller 019. There you are. Can you hear us?
Hi, Lawrence Bashir again, to Western Sky Circle.
Thank you. You may continue.
I had a couple things to bring up. I heard a lot of the discussion that went on after I got off the phone call, obviously, and I appreciate you guys taking comments there on the orientation of the building and so forth. One thing I did have an issue with though was where they mentioned that the residents here didn't read like the PUD. The PUD I'm looking at, and I'm an engineer, so I read a lot of documents and a lot of details on documents. And the the document I'm looking at, the approved Irwin Thomas final PUD plan that I got before we decided to put it down a deposit on a home here in Harvest Junction, dated from November 26th of 2018 that I received in August of 2019, only has 4 pages. And the 4 pages it has are phase 1 and phase 2. There are no other phases. So when you say that the residents just didn't read phase 3, I think that's pretty unfair. I think we read what we were provided with, and what we were provided with was not either finalized, even though it says, it's under, let's see, what does it say here on the thing? For recording by the owner on 11/26/2018. And Barb B's name is all over it, so I assume that's Barb Brunk who's on the phone call with you. So she should be aware of the details in this document. The second issue that came up with Joshua, where he talked about only a few people calling in, I happen to live right by the corner of Martin and Bountiful. It's one of the entrances. It just comes really close to my house. I'm over on that eastern edge of the community. And there was a yellow sign placed there, stuck in the ground, right, with a notice of public meeting on it. And I got the details of this meeting from that. Nowhere else. I was not given or sent a mail document of any court. I looked back for it to see if I had anything. I have nothing, right? The only record I have this, and you want to know why there weren't that many people in it, you know, you have to come by that one particular entrance to see it. I think there were a couple posted along Martin, but only on that southern corner, and maybe a few over by, you know, maybe on the south side over off Quail, but I didn't see it over there. I don't drive in off Quail very often. I only come in through Martin usually for me. So I think that hurt in terms of participation, the number of people that called in today, and I'm not sure that meets the requirements. I mean, obviously they stuck a sign out there in the field, but it was in the grassy area on the eastern side of the road, not by the community, not by the housing community. So I'm not sure that's a great notification. And like I said, with a document, I have a document, the PUD, which is 4 pages that only includes the pond picture and the gravel mine picture. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bashir. Really appreciate your feedback and sticking with us all the way past 10 o'clock tonight. So,
yeah. Well, I got a little upset when they kind of complained that maybe I didn't read the document, and that's unfortunately one of those things that will get my you know, fur up a little bit. So I wasn't happy with that. I read the document, and I read it before we put it down deposit on the home. We made a down payment. So this is what the city provided to me, and if it wasn't complete or wasn't accurate, well, they not only gave me bad information, they gave a whole bunch of people information, because obviously we're in some of the later stages of development here in Harvest Junction. We're on the eastern side. We came in last, you know. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bashir.
Okay.
Susan, nobody else has called in, I take it?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay. So I need to chat a little bit with our city attorney, Jamie Roth. If you could pop in, please.
I'm here.
Hi. So I haven't encountered this before. Mr. Bashir's comments are in the public invited to be heard, the final call, outside of the official record of the public hearing item. But during his comments that we just heard, he made mention that there might have been a failure for proper notice, or he implied that. Do we need to, we've now closed and we've made a decision on that public hearing item, the Erwin Thomas item. But with this question that Mr. Bashir, or the comment that he made, do we need to make an official finding that notice was properly served on that item, but that item's closed?
I wonder if this has come up before, and
I haven't run into it.
right. I wonder if any of the planners that are on the meeting have experienced this before.
Don?
Well, I'll comment. I was, as Mr. Bashir was making his final comments, I was looking back through the mailing list that was provided by the applicant for the hearing. And actually it was the same mailing list that was used for the neighborhood meeting as well as the notice of application. And I do see Lawrence Bashir name and address at 2 Western Sky Circle on the mailing list. So I'm not sure why he wasn't able to receive the notice that was mailed out several times for the neighborhood meeting and also for this hearing. I will also say that included in the packet as part of the certifications is that public hearing signs were posted on all of the property frontages along Martin Street, Quail Road, 119th Street, and then Highway 119 as well. So I do believe that proper notice has been provided. We did mail out, as I mentioned, as part of my presentation, in addition to the 1,000-foot notice, we decided that we also wanted to notify everybody in the Harvest Junction subdivision, even if they were outside of the 1,000-foot notice, and also notify all of the occupants of the Watermark Apartments project that's immediately adjacent to the proposed Costco lot. And so approximately 635 envelopes, mailings were sent out for each instance for the neighborhood meeting, notice of application, and the public hearing. There will also be notice sent out in advance of the public hearing with City Council.
And certainly Mr. Bashir had notice, as evidenced by his participation tonight. If there's, I would just suggest if there's additional material that Mr. Bashir would like to be considered, to send that on, but I don't think that it invalidates, any of the action that comment at the end of the meeting doesn't invalidate the actions taken tonight.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. Appreciate the legal advice on that. So, okay, next on our agenda is items from the commission. As always, thank you to Jane Madrid and to Susan Woloch, who keep the trains running for us. So really appreciate everything you do, especially behind the scenes. Of course, I don't know if y'all realize this, fellow commissioners, that we set a record this time. The biggest packet we've ever seen, 1,320 pages. So good job going through all that.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, actually, I was going to make a comment about that. In the future, especially if we get a package this big, it's kind of hard because the way it was laid out on the internet, it was kind of hard to go through the whole thing. Because there's one big dump of data and you had to go scrolling through all those pages. I'm just wondering in the future if there's a way that that can be broken up into pieces like we used, or like we've seen in the past, where I can go to just a particular area and start searching from there.
Yeah, so I don't know if other people use Adobe Acrobat, but I downloaded it, only 130 megabytes. And it is bookmarked. So I was able to jump around sections with the bookmarks, but it is still a very large document. Yeah, so Jane, Brian, Dawn, Glenn,
Yep, I can maybe provide an explanation. So when we post it on the web, there's 3 different formats. Well, there's 2 different formats, I should say. There is one PDF packet of every single document all created together. There's also the HTML version. And if you click on each individual item, it separates all of the attachments and has them listed individually. So there's those 2 different versions. So when you have a large packet, the best version is the HTML version. And you can open each project and you'll see the communication and all of the attachments listed separately.
Okay, that helps a lot, Jane. Didn't realize that. So,
which I can confirm. That's how I've been looking at it all night tonight, and I just went through the 104 pages of the certificates of mailing and posting, and can confirm what Brian said. On May 4th, he certified that he mailed to the Bashars at their residence notice of this meeting. So I don't know how Mr. Bashar missed that.
Okay, great.
But yeah, in the HTML version of our agenda for this package, there's 20 different subcategories. It doesn't dump it all on you at once. It's still difficult to read.
Commissioner Goldberg.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Unrelated to Mr. Bashir specifically, I just wanted to thank Brian and applaud staff for being prepared with those notifications and being kind of agile on the moment and being able to quickly demonstrate that the city met the burden for notification. So And thanks for that. That helps us maintain our integrity.
Yeah. And I had one more comment that I thought I'd just throw out to fellow commissioners about affordable housing. As I've been trying to learn more about it, I keep seeing experts saying we can't build our way out of the problem. You just can't build enough units fast enough to bring the affordability down. It seems as though there has to be other things, such as changes to policy, changes to procedures, changes to plans, et cetera. So, I mean, building, getting 9 acres and building some affordable housing on it, awesome, great. But it's not going to make a dent in the long run to the overall problem that we see on the Front Range. So, any other comments from the commission? Okay, next item is anything from Council Representative Rodriguez. Is our council member Rodriguez here?
Chair, I believe he's still online.
Okay.
Let me double check. He may not be able to unmute himself. Give him just a second.
Okay.
Councilmember Rodriguez, you should be able to unmute. Chair, I'm not getting a response.
Okay, well, we really appreciate having him sit in on our meetings and of course always reporting back to the council about our discussions. So nice to have him here. Item 10 on our agenda, items from Planning and Development Services Director Glenn Van Linwagen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I appreciate all the work and effort that the Planning Commission put in this evening and prior to this evening getting ready. The one thing I did want to inform the commission of is we just put out a request for proposal for some additional planning work of the Steam area and the Sugar Mill area. This was something that the council has led a very high level planning effort on, what the redevelopment might look like. And so this RFP really digs down into more of the nuts and bolts of how we actually put together and create a place there. So we're asking for some additional transportation planning, some utility planning, stormwater management, and the urban design standards, how we really create a place out of these two parcels. So we expect to have final RFPs in. It went out last week in about another 3 weeks. So we hope to have a consultant on contract in about 2 months, and we certainly expect to have the Planning Commission involved in that planning process. So again, thanks a bunch for all your effort, and that is all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you, Glenn. Next item on the agenda is adjournment. Seeing no objections, we will adjourn. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Good night.